When I was very young, when I first started going to Pony Club, I once said to my mother, one day I'm going to represent New Zealand in the Olympic Games. And she just laughed and said, yes, dear. I don't think I'll ever win another Olympic gold medal. I would dearly love to win another badminton. And of course, the World Championships, it would be great if he could be Olympic champion and world champion, but anything can happen.
I think I was a typical child. I begged for a pony from the time I could first speak, and I got my first pony when I was 4. I think probably the best characteristic I have as far as a competitor or as far as my involvement in the horse world is my dedication and my undivided love of horses.
Now just quietly, don't have to rush. Quietly. 1, 2. No, don't rush, don't rush. Just steady.
It certainly wasn't a burning ambition. When I left school, I was going to be a 3-day event rider. It just sort of happened. My grandfather was very keen, and he used to breed polo ponies and hunt a lot. So Mummy was very keen that perhaps her children would like to enjoy the same sort of sport. So I actually hunted when I was 3 years old. The success at the top is the harmony between horse and rider. When I went through a very bad patch without some very, very good horses, I really did think that I was going to sort of give up the ghost. I'd had enough of the sport. I obviously wasn't, you know, here on this earth in order to compete in 3-day eventing. And I thought to myself, well, I'll go and take a secretarial course or learn how to cook or something, which would have been quite useful. To make a top-class 3-day event horse takes confidence. There are very few brave horses born.
To ride successfully at top level, you do have to take certain risks, and there is danger involved in it. At a big competition, you're not really scared. I think you want to do well, but there's so many things you know that can go wrong. The horse can fall or anything can happen. And so you're really uptight and slightly apprehensive about it. But I think we must all be sort of adrenaline addicts.
Eventing is the ultimate test of all-round horsemanship, of the partnership between horse and rider that comes alive galloping and jumping at speed across country. The 3-day event evolved out of the training of the horse for war. Military requirements of speed, discipline and endurance across country were in peacetime translated into an equestrian triathlon, a 3-part test of horse and rider.
45 of the world's top horsemen, mounted on the finest thoroughbreds, compete at Aldershot Central Stadium for the equestrian crown to mark the closing stages of the 14th Olympiad. High spot in this 3-day riding event is the endurance, speed and cross-country test. With time limits set for each stage of the contest, a careful check is kept by stopwatch. Every 5 seconds over or under the time margins mean a loss of 5 points.
Already popular on the continent, the sport first came to England in 1948, when the Olympic trials were held at Aldershot, in front of an enthusiastic crowd.
The Gigolo, Colonel Joussome's mount, is one of the few who come down. The horse loses a shoe and the rider 60 points. France's number 2, Commandant Emanuele, also comes to grief. His horse, Tourtel, balks an early jump and throws his rider at a second attempt.
The following year, the Duke of Beaufort decided to hold a similar event on his estate at Badminton. Since then, badminton has become synonymous with the sport, and the 3 phases of dressage, cross-country and show jumping attract the largest crowds of any annual equestrian event in the world.
Finally, I know you ride your nasty motorcycles at every other event. You don't ride motorcycles in Badminton Park anywhere. But it's no good you girls flutting your eyelashes at me anymore. It's Vicomte de la Gravière that you've got to tackle. We continue, obviously, to try and look after your creature comfort.
The difficulty in here at Badminton above all others, because everybody wants to ride here, is to try to make the obstacles so that the best will be tested and the best will come out top, but the less good will not get eliminated and be a waste of time them having come.
I think the whole secret is the trust that is built up between horse and rider, and so important that you should avoid ever getting your horse in trouble.
Some of the fences don't leave you an easy enough option. It's so wide this year that if you have a hiccup at the ditch, your horse is unlucky enough to leave a hind leg or something, and so his momentum is stopped when he gets to the other side or he goes on his knees, you're in real trouble to get up and get out.
That boat thing coming out isn't even square on us,
No.
David.
Tom, come here.
It's very important that when you walk your course, you walk it so carefully. You know the slow route, you know the quick route, you make your decision. The only time you change your mind is, for example, if you're riding as an individual at Badminton. Dorothy, my trainer, will have been watching the closed circuit, and she'll say, look, it is a bit of a problem. Number 5 has got rather slippery. I don't think it's worth taking the risk. Why don't you go the slow route? Then you change your mind. But it's the brave guys that at the end of the day are going to be in front, because they have taken, say, 15 to 25 seconds, saving time going the fast route.
I don't like that. Who can go off nothing?
I know, you're only trot.
Long before I ever dreamt of building a course, I was riding myself. I know instinctively what would have worried me if I was in their shoes, and that's what I do.
Colonel Weldon fell heavily on Fingerau at the second fence in the Badminton Senior Stakes. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, though it took him a minute or two, not helped by his impatient horse, to get his breath back. One fall doesn't daunt a rider of the Colonel's caliber, so he remounted.
Badminton has become, over the course of time, the most prestigious, the biggest annual event in the world. And I think that what makes me come is if I have a wonderful horse and he's done a wonderful job, then I say sometime in his life he deserves a Badminton. And if one really wants to prove that he is a wonderful horse and he is capable of the most the sport can ask.
That the police unit by the main scoreboard in the trade stand area.
I think being from a small country like New Zealand, to start with, sort of coming over here as a fairly much an unknown, you just sort of fit in wherever you can. I think the eventing crowd anyway are a very good crowd, and they're always very friendly and willing to help, and if you're prepared to sort of get on and make the first move, then you very soon become accepted. Certainly I don't feel like a foreigner in England now.
See up there.
The first day's dressage should demonstrate the willing obedience of the horse. But if he is fit enough for the cross-country, he's often too full of energy to concentrate in the dressage arena.
I don't think I would ever become just a dressage rider. There's not quite enough excitement in it for me. But yeah, I do enjoy it. Cross-country has been my forte, if you like. But more recently, I've certainly worked a lot harder on the dressage. Three-day event is very demanding on the horse. They've got to be able to be disciplined and controlled and be sensible to produce a dressage test.
My initial attraction to the sport was the fact that you had to be a little more versatile and a little more adjustable than a rider that specialized just in racing or just in show jumping or just in the dressage. I don't take into consideration the background of the sport with the military. I would have made a horrible soldier, I'm sure. I did go to a military school up until I was 18. And I think they would agree that marching and taking orders all the time wasn't that natural to me.
For the United States, we're going to go Bruce Davidson with J.J. Babu.
Competition is now so intense that a horse must do a good dressage test if he is to have a chance of being amongst the prize winners.
When I first started competing, when I was 16 years old, I thought dressage was so boring. I couldn't imagine why we had to go around in these silly circles with the horse's head down on the floor and so on. But then, slowly but surely, I realised that the dressage actually does improve the horse's jumping and indeed its galloping.
It must be more bent round your right leg. Sometimes things are felt by the rider that don't always look quite as good or as bad to somebody else. You had a bit more flow rather than stop-go. I think the most important thing is that you must be a liaison officer between the rider and the horse. I am her coach, but I think I'm her pair of eyes, really.
I'm finding that he won't, when you say look for a bit more bend, he's almost going out on my inside leg rather than staying.
He's not really listening to both aids. You must have him a little bit more in the tunnel, between both legs.
How?
Come along.
One of the most important parts of the sport is actually understanding your horse's character. Rather like humans, you know, we're all different. We all have to be treated in a slightly different way. At the end of the day, you're getting to the same end, but you have to actually get there by being, shall we say, a little diplomatic. And if Prices and Nightcap were humans, I would say that Nightcap would have been the likes of, say, Gregory Peck. Very good-looking, tall, dark, charming, quiet, a real one for the birds, but very much a gentleman. Whereas Priceless would be much more sort of, say, the likes of Rambo, big, muscular hunk with sort of tattoos and a real toughie, and therefore would be treated in, again, a completely different way. Rather like Rambo, you know, point a gun at him and he'll fire back. Whereas Nightcap would sort of say, hang on a minute, let's talk about it. Women are fractionally more sensitive towards feelings of the horse.
Women seem to strike up a more natural rapport than the average man. And so I would say it is not only one of the few sports that men and women can compete on what is called an equal basis, but in many cases, I think the woman has a slight advantage that way. What I love about horses is I love all their personalities, and I love patting them on the back and enticing this one to do a little bit more, and giving that one the slap when he needs it and telling him that that's not on, and dealing with the mares and dealing with the stallions and dealing with the so-called level-headed geldings and making them all work as a family and unit.
In some horses you get on and you just know that temperamentally you'd never get on with it. And temperament does come into it.
Go on. Go on.
It has got to be a partnership between the horse and rider.
Good boy.
You've got to trust them to know that they're going to actually jump the fence and do what you ask, and they've got to have enough confidence in you not to question what you're asking them and just to get on and do it.
Good man. Good man. Good man.
I definitely look for horses that have reasonably good temperaments and are not difficult to ride because of their temperament.
The rider is about 75% of the combination. Everybody obviously has got to have a horse, and the horse has got to be well trained. But the good rider will make a jump look easy, whereas the not so good will find it terribly difficult.
You can never say walking the course beforehand that this course will cause so many eliminations or so many falls. Until the competition gets underway and a few horses have been round, you can't really tell.
On cross-country day, horse and rider will be working hard for nearly 1.5 hours. After the steeplechase and roads and tracks comes the moment the crowds have been waiting for.
The horse doesn't jump any higher or gallop any faster than he did 100 years ago, but the rider is capable of that improvement. So riders can expect to find things get more difficult every year. They're very often worrying. You think how you're actually going to do it before, and once you've done it, then you wonder what you were worried about. There was no reason for the sport in this country before the last Great War. The young people in those days didn't require any other excuse to risk their necks because we had fox hunting.
I don't consider the sport dangerous if you are a schooled rider and you understand what you're asking yourself to do, and your horse is schooled and he understands what you're asking him to do. That danger element is so greatly diminished. It's probably much more dangerous to get on the motorway and go 100 miles an hour into London on any given day.
Castaway today is one of Britain's most successful and popular horse trials riders. In a sport notorious for the technical and physical demands it makes on the participants, she's shown exceptional skill and courage on her way to the top. She's won at world and European level, and at the 1984 Olympics won bronze and a silver medal. She is Virginia Holgate. Virginia, what kind of a family did you come from?
Well, my father was in the Royal Marines, so we travelled a lot. Cyprus, Canada, Singapore. Mummy, who'd always been brought up with horses ever since she was 3 years old, found it quite difficult, really, to keep going with the horses in places like Singapore, but she managed it.
I look after probably the stable, really, the bedding, ordering the food, discussing what they're going to eat. Dorothy does all the training, and Ginny does the fast work.
Mummy is marvellous. She feeds the horses. I think the feeding of the horses is equally as important as, of course, the fitting work. So I really let her get on with it.
They started at 6 with a small feed of soaked hay in order to get the digestive juices going, and then at 6:30 they're fed. At about 8 o'clock, the horses that are not going out for their exercise get a small quantity of hay. No horse is allowed to be in the stable without anything to eat for longer than 2 hours. We are very keen on the environment for the horse. All hay, and especially straw, has a great many spores which are not able to be seen with the naked eye and float around in the atmosphere. And they get down into the horse's lungs, and they're one of the things that bung up the works. So we put hay in a bag, and the bag is then soaked for 24 hours because it takes that time for the spore to swell up sufficiently not to go down into the horse's lung. It gets trapped on the way down and to sink in the atmosphere. Our vet does something called a lung function test, which will tell him if all the tiny airways are absolutely clear in the lung or whether they're full of mucus and all sorts of other things.
Is the orange dry, the paint?
The reason why our setup works is that none of us interfere in the other person's job.
Please.
It is very much a close team, but an interesting one, because it's not often that 3 rather strong-willed, strong-minded females can get along together. We all respect each other's little bit of territory, and I think that's really why we all get on so well. We school the novices virtually every day, but never more than about 40 minutes.
Stay out. Good boy.
It is terribly important that they're not bored.
Good boy. It's a good boy.
I can't think that they can enjoy grinding round and round and round in circles. And very often you'll do more harm than good by simply boring them. And I think that is terribly important. The horse must be kept happy and enjoy his work.
Bruce Davidson applies the same principles using a stopwatch. His fitness program is based on interval training.
The ideas behind interval training are extremely simple and basic. The heart is a muscle, and the best way to train muscles, to make them stronger and to make them more durable, is to stress them for a short period and rest them, so that at no point is any muscle pushed to the point that it becomes fatigued. And the heart, being a muscle, then seems to thrive on shorter periods of work than it actually can take.
Bruce has pioneered this method of training since he first won the World Championship in 1974, and most of the top competitors now use the system in some form. Much of the work at his home in Pennsylvania is directed towards finding the right fitness program for each individual horse.
I use the swimming for all kinds of different reasons. One is I think it's important for the horses, if they're going to be real athletes and they're going to be completely fit, to be trained in as many different ways as possible. I think it's important mentally for them as well as physically. If you have a horse in hard training, there are a lot of things where if you can swim them, you can maintain their level of condition, and in many cases you can even improve it. But I mostly put it in just as an additive to their conditioning.
And they got loose. No, she held on.
It's important to remember why we do have these animals and why we do love them so much, but also to remember that they are fun as well. And there's nothing more fun than to have a J.J. Babu that you can go to the Olympic Games with or go to badminton with and be a real contender, and at the same time do any of the things that just a normal horse would do.
Oh, Nancy's got her boots on. We're going cross country.
I don't think the danger interests me now, and it certainly never did initially. I think the level of agreement and understanding that a rider and a horse achieve is much more interesting to me. And probably if I had been as interested in getting to know people and understanding what makes them tick, I would have been much better as a human doctor or done something else with my life. But what captivates me is horses, and so I give my life to them.
I find that riding 5 or 6 horses a day simply doesn't do the trick as far as fitness is concerned. So I work up to 700 skips a day. It's going to be a big problem training for the World Championships in Australia, mainly because of the flight, the quarantine, boredom, certainly for prices, is a problem. And you don't know how the flight is going to affect the horse. One has no means of telling. So we're slightly going into the unknown.
Countries which dominate eventing flew their horses, grooms and equipment halfway around the world to compete.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank the Australian organisers for inviting us here to this event in Gawler. It's a long way to come, but it's marvellous to see so many of you here. The preparations have been made, everything's ready, so I think we might let the competition take over from the talking, and I declare that the 6th World 3-Day Event Championships will start tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Thank you, Your Highness. Now, we have a special song.
The first vet inspection before dressage is usually uneventful, almost a formality, to check that the horse is sound before the competition. But for one former world champion, it brought disaster. Bruce Davidson's horse, Dr. Peaches, was eliminated. It was a severe shock to the American team and an inevitably controversial decision so early in the competition.
The jury that examines him in the vet examination are the dressage judges. So if they felt, while watching him do his entire dressage test, that he was not comfortable in any way, they still have the power at that point to dismiss him.
Bruce is a horseman, and he do know that his horse was not fit. He do know it. And he tried to show us in front of us. He set a mind to try to, but we're objective and we have to say no.
He goes home just like the rest of us, and we'll march on and go to our next competition and try to put things right.
At a World Championships, riders compete both as individuals and as part of a team. When walking the course, the younger British competitors were able to plan their approach to each fence with a more experienced rider like Ian Stark.
Yeah, but I think, you know, if you can keep by the red flag on the right coming into the first part, then you're going to be over this parallel and landed and thinking about turning before you've actually got set up to jump the middle.
Yeah, and
two
you have
parallels.
actually got about 3 strides before you turn.
Well, you'll actually pull up quite easily because they'll just prop a little bit and you can set up and hold them and angle this.
Yeah.
You just have to watch that after you've jumped this, you don't turn too quickly, especially if there's been any rain, because you could just slip on the turn and you might just not be outside the penalty zone.
Jump down the side if you lose you. Go down on the side. Yeah, I'm a competitor. That's okay. No worries.
I personally have to walk it 4 times, otherwise I'm not happy. When you set off through the box, the starting box, you have to be absolutely 100% certain where you're going and be totally committed.
I normally walk the course 4 times, study each fence in great detail, study all the alternatives, the striding, the approaches. Hopefully at the end of the 3rd walk, you've pretty well made up your mind how you're going to ride the course, where you're going to jump each fence, and you virtually walk it as you would ride it.
We'll have to wait till...
Well, it was cheap anyway.
Oh, well,
At this stage, the cross-country course is still an unknown quantity, and course designer Neil Ayers attempts to explain it to the press.
Now the short route we'll talk about first. The short route is the right-hand route. They jump over 9A. It's 1 stride to where the baby carriage is, into the water, and then in the water a bounce to element C. And the bounce is set at 13 feet at one end and 18 feet at the other. So the rider has the choice of taking anything from a 13 to an 18-foot bounce. That way they can't tell me that I put the wrong distance in. I can just tell them they didn't ride it in the right place, you see?
Three strides. Perfect. Perfect.
The water jump is already causing concern, though the riders may joke about it.
No. Yeah.
I suppose the water always frightens everyone, doesn't it? No one wants to go for a swim particularly. Yeah, it's a sport, you know, we take it seriously, but, everyone has to have their fun. If we were too intense walking the course, we'd probably all get too uptight about the whole thing. But, I mean, we take it seriously, there's no doubt about it.
The rain on the 2nd day is yet another distraction in an already intimidating arena.
From Great Britain, Virginia Ling and Priceless. She broke an arm in 77 in 23 places and seriously enough to consider amputation. Mark Todd and Woolrest Charisma. Not a particularly big horse, as you can see, but one who doesn't accentuate his riders 6 feet 4 inches. Mark proved his mount by winning 5 major competitions in New Zealand before selling most of his cattle and basing himself and Charisma in England. Torrance, Flashman and Finvara. As a child, Torrance hunted and showed ponies. After finishing her studies in the University of Denver, she became a fashion model, then a fragrance consultant in New York.
Finvara's performance brings her into the lead after the dressage.
I've been asked whether I find being small a disadvantage, since I have to carry lead in any of the major competitions. I don't consider myself small, first of all. I gain a pound, I think I'm enormous. I work with horses, and when they get too big, then I realize I'm quite small. And then I try to find another way to deal with them without using brute strength. And there's no way any human being can use brute strength on the horse. I don't care how big you are. There is an opinion that courses are getting very tough. I walked badminton last year 6 times, and I tried to find a way to get over the fences without being really ill. And I truly thought that Frank Weldon was absolutely out of his mind. There was so much fear involved that I rode like the hounds of hell were after me. But I will always ride a well-done course knowing that it's been done, even though it looks absolutely impossible, knowing that it's been done the fairest way possible. There are some other courses that I do not have that confidence in.
Well, I think the weather will make a tremendous difference. If the sun comes out and dries things off, you'll see a lot more horses finishing the course. If it rains, there'll be horses slipping and sliding. There are bound to be. The galloping surface is clay, a lot of it. When it rains, is just plain greasy. I used to compete, but then I broke my neck, and I'm all wired together. That's why I moved this way a bit. And when I was no longer able to compete, I became interested in course design, and the course design end of the sport.
The first riders are already on the cross-country course, while Leng and then Todd start the steeplechase.
Charisma is just a really nice character. He knows he's a star. He knows he's number one in the yard. He's not at all nasty. There's not a nasty bone in his body.
After 3,000 meters at full gallop, Phase C, the roads and tracks, demands a steady trot to an exact timing. At the end of Phase C is the start and finish line of the cross-country course. A 10-minute rest and another vet inspection to check that the horse can take the rigours of the ride ahead.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you sit there.
Incident pour l'obstacle numéro 2.
This is the last chance for riders to compare notes, learn how the course is riding, and make their choices between quick routes and the slower, safer options available at most of the obstacles. One fence which is claiming victims whichever route they ride is the water.
On course now is Virginia Lang and Priceless. And we're coming to our next three people actually who are starting out are very interesting because, and what a magnificent recovery from Ginny. Look, he's having a little pig root, and he says, gosh, I've been waiting for this all day.
Each rider sending him off on that cross country is I find, a nerve-wracking experience. And until they're back again, you're on tenterhooks.
our crew were quite alarmed with what was happening on the cross-country course. We had heard the footing was almost intolerable. The rains that had come down the day before were making the very hard-going slick, a sort of ice slick, as if you were in a skating rink on the side of a hill. And I was quite worried. I mean, I think it was probably the most worried I'd ever been on any course.
And of course, a constant medal winner. Made all sorts of trouble, but he did well with him.
I've had quite a few falls. I've broken both ankles, cracked ribs, bruised lungs, broken jaw, broken arm. It is a high-risk sport for horses and riders.
When we went out of the box on Phase D, on the cross-country, he seemed very normal. He was very good. I was quite worried. I think all of us were worried because the footing had deteriorated quite a bit from the rains on the hard ground. People were falling, horses were falling. But he galloped boldly and with his great zest all the way up to the splash. As a team, we had already lost one of our members, and I think it was essential to get around. If I'd been an individual, I would have pulled him up immediately. But I galloped him around, cantered him around over galloping fences, and bless his heart, he jumped everything absolutely immaculately. But he just didn't have any speed. There's the agony of every stride saying, do I pull him up? Do I keep going? And about halfway up the famous Gawler Hill, I saw blood coming back and hitting me on my breeches, and I knew that I was in trouble. I saw blood coming out of one nostril, and I thought, what do I do now?
That's priceless. There goes the tail. And what is she, 35? I think she's only 43 seconds. Just have a check. It's only 43 seconds. That I think is the closest that we
Hello?
22 years old.
Fantastic. I wanted to do the banks, but I thought better not. Here we go. Here comes Charisma into the lead.
No, he's had a fall. He fell in the water.
And what about Flash?
I think the main problem was the water, and it just seems like you're either lucky or unlucky there.
Do you think it's worthwhile your coming here?
Well, you got to come here to compete, haven't you? You've got to be in to win, so.
Thanks. How was it, Charlie? Did somebody pick up the stick? The stick I threw to you?
Yeah.
Can you run down and check?
The more I think about it, the more I realize he must have really cracked his head because he jumped the double brush badly after it.
It really was a conscious thing that I kept him going, but it weighs on me a lot, mentally and emotionally, because this horse is a good friend.
Finvara is withdrawn, and the American team is out of the event. Ginny Lang after adding only a few time penalties to her score, has moved into second place.
Number 36, Priceless, is passed.
In the lead is Tinks Pottinger of New Zealand, the only rider to complete the course within the time allowed. To most of those watching, it is clear that something is wrong with her horse Volunteer.
Volunteer is eliminated.
When a horse is really dead lame, you can't allow him to go because he can be going worse and worse. And naturally, he has now to be looked by the vet to make him better. But anyway, when you have a dead horse who is dead, lambing dead, you can't let him go.
Months, years of preparation can come to nothing in one unlucky moment. The sport of eventing is built upon the dedication required to get a horse to a peak of fitness which will enable him to stay sound to the end of a major three-day competition. For the riders, this is the real challenge of the sport. On the final day of show jumping, even the fittest horse will be feeling the strain of the previous day. Though Tinks is out of the running, the New Zealanders are still in a strong position as a team. The scores from the dressage and the cross-country have been added together, and finally, everyone knows what is at stake.
I think I get quite nervous inwardly because so much is gained or indeed lost in the show jumping phase. 5 penalties is very expensive. I mean, it used to be 10, but now, thank goodness, it's 5. But you can so very often be, say, lying third, equal with somebody else, and you've got one fence which will move you down to 10th place if you have a fence down. So it really, I find the show jumping the most nerve-wracking part of the whole competition.
The final fence, and if Ginny and Priceless go clear, the World Championship will be theirs.
some people it's the end of the world if they lose. They go home, they write letters, they cry, leave me alone for 5 minutes and then I'm fine, back to normal again. It's not like a job. I wouldn't change it for the world.
When you know cats, you know that some...
I went into a wheelchair for a few weeks, then on crutches. I was out for 2.5 months. I had 50 splinters taken out of my hand. That put me out for 4 months. I wear a mask because I just don't want to have my face smashed in. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've probably lost 5 or 6 polo players. It's usually broken necks.
It's a dangerous game, both for the horses and the man. I've been unconscious for 4 or 5 hours. A lot of stitches. I had 28 stitches here from a polo mallet.
I had a lot of accidents, but really serious was the horse went over me flat out. If the horse will catch you before you hit the ground, that will make you whip with the head or will land on top of your head, the horse, then it's really bad.
No.
You get injuries all the time.
Is it quite so hard?
It's no good worrying about them. Broken collarbone, broken cheekbone, broken... I cracked my jawbone about 2 years ago. But, you know, all these things, I mean, at the time, it's a pain, literally, but it's also a nuisance because you're laid off.
Acknowledged as the fastest game in the world after ice hockey, polo, not surprisingly, takes its toll on the ponies as well as the players. Apart from the inevitable cuts and bruises from flying mallets, the backbone and pelvis can sometimes be put out by the sharp stops and turns and violent ride-offs.
Those bones should be absolutely in a straight line like that. And where they've subluxated either one way or the other, then I'm straightening them out. That's what they should do too. Because if they're wrong, you can't lift that tail up. They clamp it down.
Claire Tomlinson has the highest handicap ever attained by a woman. Her father helped to revive post-war polo in England, and Claire now pursues it with extraordinary dedication, breeding and training more ponies than anyone else in England.
Claire Tomlinson, well, you don't give her much at all because she's too good for that.
Potter!
She'll give it to you.
Potter!
You treat her as a, as a boy, really.
The first time I played against Claire, I didn't know the lady. I didn't want to be rude or bump hard or anything like that. And the next thing I know, boy, she about knocked me down. I said, you're going to have to pay attention to what's going on here. This lady's come to play polo.
Some men will really try to rough you up, especially in England. The Argentines are always very polite, but you see, the better the player, the less they need to be run. The more agile that you can make your horse, it is a continuation of your body. You've got to put your horse within half an inch of where you want him to hit the correct shot. It's rather like approaching a fence. You have to get the stride. You want it to be lifting its legs up as you start to hit the ball. Polo ponies, the good ones, love the game. There is absolutely no question about it. You can feel that their heart is totally in it. There's an incredible shortage of polo ponies. So we breed them and bring them on with the aim that they're going to play polo. Above all, I try to handle them in a way where they trust the person who's handling them. And this means usually that you get a quiet horse that's not going to object when you do something new. I sit with them when they're a year and a bit, and I back them when they're 3. I think if you take each pony at their own speed, there's no reason why they shouldn't all play polo. There's a good girl. There's a good girl. I don't like any horse that kicks, or I don't think there's any excuse for that, really. There's a good girl. Hey. But I mean, when she gets going, she's not a donkey. Once they're 6, they've got to go and earn their oats. So open up. If they learn to shy away from other horses, then they're always going to do it. Come on. You can't actually get them to ride off properly until they answer to the leg, move away from the leg. You have to be on the verge of doing a half pass. Hopefully by the time my ponies play properly, they can do a half pass. Don't let her jack out. Don't let her do that. She mustn't learn to do that. Come on, push her on. Give her one down the backside. Come on, push her on. Faster. That's it. Well done. I usually make about 7 or 8 polo ponies every year. Time is the thing. Once you try to hurry it, that's when the ponies go wrong. Come on. Come on. No, wrong leg. Come on. There's a good girl. Come on. In Argentina, they tend to handle their horses much later. The time spent in the early stages is nil, and they try to condense the breaking in time.
Who's coming? Ah, el Pablo. De juego.
In Argentina, they'll want them to buck. Their idea is that they've got to break the horse's spirit. They have to conquer the horse. And some of the methods are cruel, but it seems to work for them. You know, they get some very good horses.
Empiezan a brotar, seña que viene llegando ya el tiempo del carnaval, ya el tiempo del carnaval. Yo ya me pongo a llorar.
As interest in the sport increases, so do the pressures on the top players. Often under contract to a commercial sponsor or a private patron, they travel around the world following the sun, playing for 11.5 months a year in 4 or 5 different countries.
you kind of lose your sense of reality because you're always moving and 3 months here, 2 months there. And I'd like to stay at home sometimes.
It's a lot tougher in America. The grounds are better, faster, and they spend more money on their horses, so it gets a lot more sort of brutal, harder ride-offs. Gonzalo Pires, he'd die when I say this, but he's one of those players that doesn't bother to get out of bed until 12 o'clock. And he's one of the lucky guys who's just a natural. He can do anything and then just turn up and be brilliant. He just has it in his blood. Very, very quick. Anticipation is incredible.
When you play against Gonzalo, he's mounted so well, he doesn't have a weak chucker. He's got 6 very strong horses. So what you have to do, one player on your team has to get control of him, try to eliminate him before he ever gets to the ball. Don't ever let him get to the ball.
I think the best ability that I have is that I don't take too long to feel comfortable on any horse. Some people really do mind changing from one to another. I don't think you have to horses that they move the same in the whole world. You should be able to adjust to the horse in maybe 1 minute of the chucker. You cannot take longer than that because the game is over. The Hippolyte brothers, the higher the polo is, the better that they play. In England, they don't play as much high goal polo, and I imagine that they got this ability just dreaming.
Julian ducks his head and goes through people. Howard really hits the ball hard. Neither one of them like to turn on the ball or tap the ball. They like to play a fast running game. So what you try to do is slow the game down. They're both really top players.
Tommy Wayman getting the first score of this afternoon's match, and it's now Ratama, Southern Hills.
Tommy Wayman, he likes sitting with the boys, chewing his tobacco and spitting with a can of beer in his hand, and to play polo with the people he likes. He has a very good reputation of making horses. He has wonderful striking ability.
He has one of the best eyes you can find in polo. He's very good to hit the ball in the air. If the ground is bouncy, it's no different for him. He's always very well mounted. The best way to play against him is to try to play a very open game. He's one of the quickest in the game.
You know, you never, ever play the perfect game. You've got to make a mistake somewhere. I think the reason I got better was because of the horses. I was able to make enough top horses to keep me a step ahead of the people that I was playing against. My horses play 6 months of the year, but no more than 3 months at a time. They last much longer than that. There are players, if they've got a good horse, they'll play at 2 chukkers in every game, 2 chukkers, 2 chukkers. Well, if a horse has got 1,000 chukkers in him over a 10-year period, you're cutting his lifespan in half. So I don't like to double up on my horses unless I just really have to. Which maybe once a year I'll play a horse twice, and that's all. And my horses last longer. I've got horses that I'm playing now that that have been playing high goal polo under me for 6, 7 years.
Knuckle down! Come on, Tommy. Well hit, Mikey! Well done! Come on, boys! Come on! Stop being a hot dog, damn it. 1 minute? Come on, Tommy! No, less. Less.
Sends that ball right to goal. Shot, he's on the mark. Howie Wayman, former 10-goal player. What a beautiful net shot.
The dog park
Look
it
at
up!
that.
I got the collar to see in, Bill Harvey. I can't believe it. Well done, Mike. I can't believe it. How many times we've been to this thing and we've never done it?
I love that. I love the miniature one.
The press have built us into sort of jet-set, macho men that earn millions and millions or thousands and thousands. In actual fact, our life is a way of life.
I never feel it as a social thing. For us, really, all the champagne and all those things, and, you know, we take it as something normal.
There's some people that come to polo games not to watch the game, but just to be seen. But to each his own. The high society image of polo doesn't affect me that much because it's a living to me.
Polo is on the increase. It's on the increase here in Argentina. It's growing in the United States. I haven't been in England lately, but I imagine that will be growing there. It's growing in Brazil, growing in all South and North America. Even they're playing polo in Asia. In the whole world, I think the polo is growing. Polo is changing. Before it used to be more a game to play between friends. I think now that you have to play to win.
The speed they go at now is out of this world.
Polo has done nothing but go up for the last 5 years. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea. Things are happening too fast for me. It's just grown by leaps and bounds. It's just incredible. I would think that the golden days of polo are now maybe just beginning.
show jumping, probably the most popular equestrian sport, in which some 80 countries now compete. With top prize money reaching $250,000 and horses costing up to $1.5 million, show jumping is big business, made possible only by commercial sponsorship. The sport attracts huge audiences, and television viewers for the big events run into billions. What is so compelling about the Grand Prix arena?
The sport, of course, is intrinsically very artificial, and people have sometimes asked me, how can you attach so much importance to the fact that you build these ridiculous artificial fences and then you jump them and he happens to jump them a second or 2 seconds faster or leaves one more of them up than you do, and that's a matter of very great consequence? Well, every sport is more or less artificial, and there's an endless fascination in the complex collaboration between the man and the horse. You have two different talents, two bodies, two temperaments, two different experiences with life. And of course, on the big day, you both have to synchronize absolutely perfectly. I can get up on the right side of my bed, but my horse has to get up on the right side of his stall as well.
Bill Steinkraus, individual gold medalist for the United States in 1968, and now chairman of the US equestrian team, has played a major role in helping America to rise to the forefront of this sport, and he is now recognized as a world authority on show jumping. Michael Matz, one of today's leading competitors who has won 4 gold medals in the Pan American Games, as well as a World Cup final, owes his early successes to his relationship with the brilliant Jet Run. Now he is building another strong partnership with Chef.
Welcome from Pennsylvania, superstar rider Michael Matz and Chef.
What exactly makes for a winning partnership?
Chef is a small horse. He's a little bit over 16 hands. Every time he goes in the ring, the fences are over his head. He's a horse that has a lot of courage. He has that little bit of fight in him that I think that makes him a good horse.
Michael Matz is a real perfectionist and a great stylist, and very few riders have ever made difficult things look so easy. In fact, sometimes people are disappointed the first time they watch him because they can't see him really doing anything, and they very rarely realize how fast he's going. But that's his art. He's still regulating every stride and every takeoff, but he's doing it all so skillfully that it seems to be just inevitable.
I'm maybe not a natural, but I work at it maybe a little bit harder. I try to be as consistent as possible. I'm not going to take real big chances. I'm not going to go crazy in a jump off. I'll do what I have to do. I'd rather always get a piece of a Grand Prix than 1 week win and never hear from me again in 6 months.
On the other side of the Atlantic, John Whittaker's partnership with the matchless Ryan's son took him to the top of the sport in Great Britain. He has since won medals at the Olympic Games, the World Championships, and the European Championships.
John Whittaker is a typical North Countryman, and it's been really fascinating to watch his development as a rider. In temperament, he's very strong and rather quiet. His first great collaboration was with Ryan's son, who was a real old-fashioned pattern of horse, and John rode him in a somewhat old-fashioned northern Yorkshire way, with a long rein and long stirrups, and they won an awful lot together, including the individual silver medal at the 1980 alternate Olympics. Since then, John's developed an entirely new partnership with a very different kind of horse, Milton, and he's learned to ride him in a very different way, a somewhat more classical way, with a shorter stirrup and riding very much more forward. But no matter what he's riding, Johnny is certainly one of the very soundest riders in the world today.
Over in Germany, always a leading nation in this sport, few riders have had more success than Paul Schockermoeller, 3 times European champion and 5 times German national champion. He's especially well known for his partnership with the brilliant but unconventional Deister.
I know him quite well, how he reacts and so on, and he would try to jump fences. I believe for sure that he couldn't jump if I would ask to. I believe he probably knows a little bit when it's important, when not, because he realized how I'm reacting, if I take the job serious or not.
By far the most individualistic of the world-class riders today is Paul Schockemüller. Paul's favorite horse, Deister, is also sort of quirky. Sometimes Deister is twisting one way and Paul seems to be twisting the other to counterbalance him. And the result is unconventional, to say the very least. But they suit each other perfectly, and they've compiled a remarkable record in the major competitions.
To have a good mental rapport with your horse, it's exactly the same as having a really good marriage and understanding. You know when to throw your hat through the door or not. You know when you can make a noise or not. You know when you can talk seriously or not. Horses have lots of ways of answering back, but it isn't vocal.
What then is involved in the long and arduous business of training the show jumper to be obedient and careful?
You have to remain a friend, and yet you have to have respect. You can't do nasty things of abuse, but you can put horses in the way of making little mistakes so that they're careful for themselves.
Back in Pennsylvania, Michael Matz's training puts these ideas into practice.
You can't make somebody something that they aren't. You're not going to make me a Carl Lewis, because I can't run very fast. Even if you hit me with a hot prod in the rear end, I'm not going to run. And there's all sorts of things you can do to a horse to stop them from hitting a fence, but I've never known one method that's lasted very long. Usually it's telling you that the horse isn't very good. I do a lot of little jumps, but really make them learn how to turn and listen to you. Even 1-foot fence or a 2-foot fence, they can learn to turn over that, and you don't have to school them to death. Everybody tries to make it hard, and I try to do everything as simple as possible. You have a bad class, it's not the end of the world. Don't go change your whole stable, your whole training. You go to the next class and keep going the same way.
Although horses perhaps don't reason very well, they have marvelous memories. And the shared experience, having been through big Grand Prix, having both been flat out with their nerves stretched to the maximum, that's something that builds up a remarkable confidence and a remarkable intimacy. I would say that the average jumper would spend 2 or 3 years just learning his craft, learning to jump straightforward courses. And then he has to spend a couple of years going around the world, seeing different venues, seeing different variations of difficult courses. If you overmatch him early in his career, for sure he never makes the top. The true foundation for jumping performance is the horse's obedience and suppleness on the flat. Riders like Michael Matz take enormous pains with their flat work. They teach the horse to do all sorts of different things, to bend, lengthen, shorten, turn very sharply while still keeping perfect balance. And Michael spends much more time on the flat work than he does in actually jumping fences. The reason, of course, is that the real art of show jumping lies in riding the approach. And I would say that most knockdowns come from a fault during the approach rather than some defect in jumping technique or jumping form itself. It's the horse who honestly is the athlete. And the rider really has to be the trainer, father confessor, parent, but the horse has to finally do the work. And thus, the rider's physical strength is not a very important factor.
Jumper is a very delicate mixture of chicken and bravery. He has to be scared enough not to want to hit the jumps, but still brave enough and get down and try and jump them. If you put too much of the chicken in the mixture, he won't go. If you put too much bravery in the mixture, he knocks everything down, doesn't care. So that's where training is, just to keep that very delicate balance. And if you have done it right, the horse eye will synchronize with the rider's eye and see what the distance is and know to shorten or know to lengthen.
Paul Schockemoeller is of the same opinion.
There are so many different things a horse has to have as a show jumper. They have to have scope, they have to be brave, but they have to be careful as well. Brave and careful. That's very difficult thing together.
The flat work in Paul's yard is mostly seen to by other riders, because Paul has so many other businesses to run. One of the ways in which his system differs from those of other riders is that every horse in the yard will spend 2 to 3 hours per day on the horse walker, as well as being ridden. Paul believes this is good for the horse's muscles, tendons, blood circulation, and even his bones. No training system could be more different from Paul's than that of John Whittaker and his equally successful brother Michael up in Yorkshire in England.
Get phone, John.
Their seemingly casual approach is designed to make the best use of what they have available and proves equally effective for them.
I think the facilities only make life a little bit easier. You can still do the same thing in your back garden, really. If it's raining, it's not quite so pleasant. Or if it's muddy, it's not quite so pleasant. If you're doing something you enjoy, you know, what more do you want? It's one thing getting to the top, but staying there is another thing. That's what I'm working on, staying there.
In the days when there were relatively few truly important shows, pressure on the horses was much less, and show jumpers really could last a long time. Today we have major competitions the whole year round, and a primary concern for every rider is wondering how long his present string of horses is going to last and where the next ones are going to come from. Show jumpers used to spend the time between shows practicing or resting, and today instead they spend it looking for new horses and training young ones.
It's a partnership together, and unless your horse is working to help you, well, you're fighting a losing battle, really. And very often you can make a mistake, and if he's a nice horse, going up there, you know, and he'll try that little bit harder and clear the pole, and you win the class, everybody thinks, my God, he's a super rider, when in fact the horse has saved you from making a silly mistake. It's your job to know at all times when you're riding practically where every foot is on the ground. It's my job to get him to the spot where he takes off, to have his rhythm right and the pace right and his shape in himself, and after that it's up to him to carry me over. The jumping part to me is terribly easy. It's the approach that's the difficult part.
The top show jumper is obviously a very rare animal. What are the qualities a rider looks for in a potential world beater?
The really good horse is composed of a lot of different ingredients, and if any one of them is outstanding enough, it can cover deficiencies in other areas. He needs strength, of course, not necessarily the kind of strength it takes to jump huge puissance walls, but enough strength and scope to cope with a variety of big fences. He needs considerable agility and gymnastic ability, and he needs a lot of courage and willingness to be pushed right to the limits of his ability. But most of all, he needs the kind of temperament, not necessarily an easy one either, that will let him produce his very best performances under the very toughest circumstances.
How does the rider set about finding a new horse? Many people are intimidated by the prospect of the horse dealer, but yards like those of Charles Edwards in Shropshire still turn out quantities of young horses with good potential every year.
We sell a lot of young horses each year, 50, 60 or 70 young horses for sure. His value is what you can make of him. When I started off as a young man, you'd buy a nice horse for £500. A good novice today is worth anything from 10 to 15,000. It's his brain and his heart is the most important thing. Things that you can't see.
You walk in the yard and somebody pulls it out. You feel something. You see something in the eyes or in the look of a head. It's special. It's like falling in love. It's indefinable.
I still prefer the grey one.
It's like myself. There's a bit of snow on the roof, but there'll be plenty of fire in the furnace.
You buy what horses you can find, and then you can go 2 or 3 years without even finding anything you like at all. I like a good back end, an intelligent head. His outlook on life wants to be nice. I like to see them when they leave the floor. You know, something magic when they leave. You know, they're like a cat. They come off the floor. They don't pound along. You know, they hear a good horse when he canters along on the ground. He just touches it, and you know, he's sort of cantering on air all the time.
Sure to make top class in capable hands. Well-mannered both in and out of the stable, and for sale through no fault of his own.
Another big problem in buying new horses is, of course, to find the money. Corporate sponsorship has helped for some lucky riders, but for others, the auction room offers a cheaper, if riskier, way to find new prospects.
Top horses are always hard to find because there's so few of them. Animals like that I would probably compare to the sort of chap that walks on a tightrope. It's a facility of the mind, really, more than physical, I believe. You're looking for an animal with a very special mind, an animal that actually wants basically to jump clean from the very beginning. If the animal itself doesn't really worry whether it knocks a fence down or jumps it clean, you're on a lost cause.
For those with the time, money and space, a more systematic way of producing jumpers is to breed them, using mares and stallions who have already proven their worth. In England, there is no real breeding system for jumpers, but in Germany, it is a serious business. Paul Schockermöller, for example, also runs a stud farm which brings his total number of horses to an incredible 500. Paul, unlike some horsemen, believes that horses show their jumping potential very young, and he jumps them free in the arena when they are only yearlings to see whether they are worth the years of training.
I will give him notes about scope, form, and so on. I believe the back is even more important than the front legs. If they hang a little bit with front legs, normally with age you can train them.
Paul's mass production operation to breed and develop jumpers is unique both in its size and its success. He reckons to sell some 200 or 300 horses every year, of which around 25 will be Grand Prix jumpers. Over in America, there is much interest in recent high-tech developments in the breeding of horses. At Hamilton Farms in Massachusetts, Meg Hamilton and Mary Lou Cabot have started a very sophisticated operation, transporting the semen of brilliant show jumping and dressage stallions to mares all over the world.
Mary Lou and I both got very tired of shipping mares 1,000 miles to find a good stallion, and then the mare would come home sick and not in foal, and we would have spent $1,500 to $2,000 over and above the stud fee and have nothing to show for it. Just a normal artificial insemination collection. You have to be very careful of contamination and your temperature regimes. You can't use sloppy AI practice. In other words, you can't drop it on the floor and scoop it up and ship it because it won't live. But basically, you simply collect it and you just extend it maybe 3 or 4 to 1. Extender's like a nutrient fluid. You put it in for the journey. Put it right in the equitainer and send it on its way. Many people read to Abdullah now with Transported Seamen and To I Love You and Galubay. I believe that it's the thing of the future.
Once you have the outstanding horse, the key factor is how well he matches up with the rider who's going to ride him. And very great horses have sometimes spent long periods of time in unsympathetic hands, showing nothing.
You know, everybody rides slightly different, and very often you can get a horse that's gone a little bit careless for one rider. You can give it to another one, and it's sort of his computer system is different to the other fellows. The horse is taken out of his little bit of complacency, and he'll suddenly become very careful, purely because you've ridden him a different way.
To me, when I look at it, you have a 1,500-pound horse, a rider with an average around 150 pounds, and you're controlling him with two little pieces of leather in their mouth. If it's done wrong, it could be really disaster. And when it's really done right, it's really beautiful to see. It really is art.
From among the very best horse and rider partnerships, what exactly is it that distinguishes the winner?
Everybody can learn to ride. The gifted rider can do things that you can't teach. He perhaps has the sixth sense as to how much he can get out of the horse, and when asking for just that little bit more would be asking for too much.
You have to have a facility that tells you, if I forgive that mare that little habit, it'll give me a better performance. On another animal, that would denote total failure.
The gifted rider has also the ability perhaps to do things that are wrong and get away with them because the horse accepts it from him where he wouldn't from somewhere else. Mind you, I think that talent alone isn't enough. It has to be talent supported by an awful lot of hard work.
Even then, things can easily go wrong, and the sport is sometimes dangerous.
You've got to be brave. You've got to want to win. Which means you don't have to think about anything else but winning. You need to have a very sharp mind, great attention to detail. You spot that a turn's possible, or that other people have galloped too fast and can't turn back quickly enough. If you really want to win, you don't miss a trick.
The difficult thing about the jump-off is that while almost all the riders in the competition could presumably jump a clear round if time were not a factor, time is a factor, and they have to determine how big a cut they're going to take against the clock. That in turn is influenced by the position of the draw. If they have to go very early, you can either say, well, I'm going to go like a bat out of hell and hang up such a brilliant time that nobody can possibly catch it. Or you might say, well, maybe I'll just chalk up a clear round, and if it's pretty quick, perhaps I will put so much pressure on the horses that follow me that in trying to be faster, they will have a fence down.
The American team have been supreme at both the Olympics and the World Championships in recent years. Why should this be?
America, for me, is where it's at the moment because they train intelligently. Their facilities are fantastic. They don't leave a stone unturned. They put their whole being into that great thing of America, be a winner. Their veterinary side is way ahead. their techniques in keeping horses sound, in treating injuries which are bound to happen. The whole spectrum is so much more tied up into one big whole. You have a training barn with lots of horses and good facilities, and the barn vet. If you ride for a barn, there's everybody there giving 101% for that barn to win a class.
Retard a little in the air.
They're not afraid to say that they go to a trainer. In England, it happens very little, on a formal basis.
Different things to take his mouth. You want a very firm contact.
George Morris is the best-known American trainer. As a young rider, he worked with the great Bertolin de Nemethy, a Hungarian cavalry officer who came to the States in the 50s and proved an immediate catalyst for the newly established US equestrian team. Since retiring as team coach, Bert de Nemethy has concentrated on course building, a field in which he also excels. Indeed, he built the course at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles.
Bert de Nemethy in LA tried something quite different. More technical, lighter poles, not such enormous spreads, using colour a lot to try and draw horses' eyes away from the top of the fence, putting more onus on the rider and correctness of training.
There's more and more realisation in the effect of multicoloured fences, fences that merge into the background, for instance, exactly the green of the grass. The better the horse is trained, the better the chance of jumping such fences.
The challenge to the riders, it seems to me, in years to come will become increasingly a strategic and an intellectual challenge. You have to plan horses' careers. In tennis and in golf, we're finding that the best players recognize that they cannot go flat out 52 weeks a year. And I think exactly the same challenge will face the rider. You really have to manage horses' careers now, and indeed your own.
Dressage, polo or racing, show jumping is very much a newcomer. Although not natural jumpers like deer or cats, horses have been required to jump fences ever since land began to be enclosed in the 18th century. At this stage, negotiating the fence without falling was the prime consideration, to enable the fox hunter to keep up with the hounds on the hunting field. Not much attention was paid to the horse's comfort in trying to find the best way to ride over fences. European cavalries almost universally employed the traditional backward seat until the early 1900s, when the Italian Federico Caprilli introduced the modern forward position, enabling the horse to jump with far greater ease. Jumping competitions had been going on for some 50 years by then. Known as leaping contests, they often involved only one fence, but impressive heights were sometimes scaled. The American thoroughbred Heatherbloom is seen here topping 8 foot 3 inches with Dick Donnelly in 1903. Women were not barred from the early competitions, although they were somewhat handicapped by the side saddle seat, still expected of them in those days. Eventually it became clear that a series of varied fences had far greater appeal for riders and spectators alike. Jumping competitions began to flourish, but required significantly less skill and sophistication than the competitions of today.
The championship meeting of the British Show Jumping Association brought hundreds of visitors from the Dales and Shires to London's White City. Cathay cameramen were at the championships, and some of the jumps are shown in slow motion. High spot of the day was the big jumper class, in spite of a few bad jumps and a cropper or two. 10 massive and tricky jumps make up the full course, and only a perfect combination of horse and rider stands a chance. Prize, £100, a cup, and the blue rosette that means the Championship of Britain.
The early courses consisted of different fences spaced around the arena, and little attention was paid to anything but the height and width of the fences. Gradually, however, the importance of course design began to emerge. Today's course designers are recognized as masters in the use of awkward distances between fences, testing angles, even strange colors, or the unevenness of the ground.
I have observed that the horse can make a 7 and 8 feet stride between fences if gradually is trained for that. On the other hand, normally I would say that they're making 12 feet. The rider has to show how much control he has with his animal and how much cooperating the horse with the rider.
Building show jumping courses has become both an art and a science. The modern course designer poses an examination for the horse and rider and challenges them to show that they can play all the shots, that they can lengthen stride, shorten stride, make difficult turns, and so forth. And he really demands, I think, of the winner of a great title that he has demonstrated that he's a complete horseman and that the horse is a complete horse. Horses can readily be trained to jump fences entirely off their own judgment, with the rider being only a passenger. The show jumper can never be ridden that way because of the way in which courses are built.
When the riders inspect a course, it is the first and last time they see it before the competition, and there is much to be considered.
We have to anticipate a little bit how things may look to the horse. We have to be aware of where the sun is, of things that may look peculiar to the horse as he approaches the fence.
When I walk the course, I'm just trying to get a basic feel for how my horse's stride will fit the course, what distance problems are, what will be easy for my horse, what will be hard. The horse could stumble, the horse could take too much time in the air, and it will make the distance change completely. So at that point, you have to make a quick decision.
Don't watch me because I'm definitely not doing
Well, you're right, the shaft. It's doable both days. But they better have a pretty good stride to get there in 5.
You can't build the same course exactly twice in a row, even if you attempt to do so. The position of the fences will always be a foot out or something like that, and the materials are always varying also. The real challenge to the course builder is to be able to separate the best riders in the competition from each other without burying those who are at the other end of the scale. The ways in which the designer accomplishes this are very often difficult to see from the stands. The depth of the cup that supports the pole can vary between, say 1 3/4 inches or less than 1 inch. And the very shallow cups, of course, permit poles to fall down very readily. The great course designers are constantly surprising you.
Another great course designer is Arno Gego, who built the courses for all the competitions at the last World Championships.
In the first 2 competitions, I do less complicated things than in the third competition where you have the top 20. I like very much the creative side of course design. I like very much to play with the colors, with the material, to play with the ground. It's a little bit going up and down. Riders sometimes do not observe it. Each big course for me is like a birth of a new baby. It's growing, it needs 9 months, and after the 9th month the baby is coming out. You see with some pain in the first moment, and you have the first rider, he has 4 faults and you are happy. Baby is there, is good. Yeah.
Earlier competitions at the World Championships here in Aachen have resulted in the team gold for the Americans, and only the finals for the individual championship are still to come. This is a fascinating competition in which the 4 leading riders up to now start anew with 0 scores and perform a sort of round robin. First they jump their own horse, and then each of the other 3 horses belonging to the other riders. The finalists this time are Conrad Homfeld from the United States, Nick Skelton from Great Britain, Pierre Durand from France, who was the clear winner of the qualifying competitions, and for the first time, a woman, Gail Greenough from Canada.
Conrad Homfeld is a complex personality and really a riding genius because he can combine his extraordinary natural talent with brilliant technique, and thus he has the ability to ride about anything on four legs. Conrad's always liked difficult horses, and this beautiful Trakehner stallion, Abdullah, is one of his real triumphs. Abdullah always was impressive, but the temperament sometimes let him down before Conrad got him. Now they've got 2 Olympic medals and a World Cup title together, and that shows the quality of their partnership. Nick Skelton is a professional, of course, and perhaps not quite as stylish a rider as Conrad, but the quality of his talent is absolutely as high, and nobody in the world has a better feeling for the horse's stride or a keener sense of strategy. Nick has started to ride the Dutch-bred Apollo, who is a really strong, solid kind of horse. But Apollo gets bored with things every now and then and can become a bit strong and a bit careless. Even so, Nick has won the Grand Prix of Aachen with him already, so they clearly get along together. The other riders are not quite so sure how they're going to get along. Pierre Durand of France is a lawyer by profession and not a full-time show jumper at all, nor is he someone who has created a whole bunch of legendary performances with different horses. But with Japelou, he has a relationship of such complete sympathy and mutual understanding that their very best performances recently have been absolutely unforgettable. Little Japelou is just like a rubber ball because he does everything through pure bounce and spring. But he has a lot of temperament, and although everybody is looking forward to riding him, who knows how so unusual a little horse will go for someone else. The completely unknown quantity in the finals for most Europeans is Gail Greenough because she's riding in Europe for the first time. As a young rider, she showed a lot of spunk and a completely disarming amount of charm, along with a lot of natural ability. In Mr. T, she has a very talented horse who is apparently quite straightforward temperamentally, but before she got him, he'd attracted very little attention, so she must have had something to do with his creation. Gail and Mr. T are definitely the outsiders in this group because no woman has ever qualified for the Final Four since the separate Ladies' World Championship was abandoned, so it's a big order even for a very spunky girl.
I think that Pierre Durand should deserve to be world champion right now. I think the competition today is not in his favor. He was for sure the clear winner of the qualifying competitions. Now they all go in equal today.
In my situation, then I think now I've got another chance to have a go at being world champion. It's working in my favor now.
This to me is sort of a cheap theatrical trick. This last part, in my opinion, it's now thrown up to the gods. It could go any way.
A lot of people decry the whole thing, yet no one comes up with a better formula. The only person I believe could have problems would be Gail Greenough. She's a girl and hasn't got the power of the 2 men.
I think maybe the more experience you have, the more you think about it, and the more you try and ride the other horses. Maybe it might work to my advantage that I don't have the experience. I'm just going to get on, I'm just going to trust my instincts to take over, and hopefully that's going to carry me through.
I have a job and I cannot ride every day. And I ride only 2 or 3 horses in my stable. And I'm not accustomed to ride many horses.
Japelou is a fantastic horse. He looks hot, but the very nicest kind of hot. Gail Greenough's horse looks pretty straightforward. He looks like he might be a little bit strong, but again, not a complex personality.
Japelou, like I say, I think he's going to be good with anybody. And Mr. T, well, he looks easy enough.
Abdullah, I think I'm a little lucky. I've drawn him second, so I ride him immediately after Conrad does, which I think will help.
I think it all depends who you follow too. I mean, if they've had a bad ride with one jockey, and they've probably still got a little bit of memory there, and then, you know, it could go wrong for you.
The horse that concerns me the most is Apollo. Nick is such an artist, and it's very hard to improve on his act.
My most concern is with Apollo, because I think he takes a great deal of strength, and that's something I don't really have compared to the male riders. But I'll just pull under the reins and pull them and hope for the best.
I am afraid by Apollo, the horse of Nick Skelton.
Biggest problem is probably my own. Trying to ride it my own clear.
Whatever the merits of this method of selecting a world champion, no one can dispute that it's a tremendous challenge for the riders, who must adapt almost instantly to 3 unfamiliar horses.
I hope you win.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it'd be a tough competition between all 4 riders.
The pressure really is not on me, really, at all. I'm the first female to make it to the World Championships, and I believe I'm the first Canadian. I don't think that the pressure's on me. I think the pressure's on the men.
The first round, in which each rider rides his own horse. Although the course is of moderate size, there is quite a tricky combination. A treble as the very last fence. Conrad and Abdullah are the first to go. Clear so far, they approach the end of the course. A fluent, clear round. Nick and Apollo come next. Another trouble-free performance. Pierre and Japelou have one fence down already. And now another, for a disappointing 8 faults. Gale and Mr. T are the last in this round. And they have no problems. This leaves 3 riders with no faults after the first round. Now for the interesting part of the competition. Each rider has 2 minutes in which to get used to the new horse in the warm-up arena. During this time, they may jump 2 practice fences. Conrad, first to go, riding Nick's Apollo, has an early fence down. But no further problems. Nick follows on Pierre's Japelou. Not the smoothest of rounds, but he gets away with it and is clear. Pierre, however, finds Gale's Mr. T incomprehensible and knocks up 12 faults. His total of 20 really puts him out of the running, only halfway through the competition. Gale must now ride Conrad's stallion, Abdullah, an intimidating mount for a small girl. She makes a very different picture in the saddle from Conrad. But it doesn't seem to affect Abdullah, who goes clear again. Gale and Nick now have 2 faultless rounds each, as we come to the 3rd round. The first pair, Conrad and Japelou, set off. They seem to be going well. But then they have a fence down, to give Conrad a total of 8 faults after 3 rounds. Nick has thus become the definite favourite as he starts his round with Mr. T, who has not really given him cause for worry. This disastrous and unexpected event turns things entirely around. The pressure suddenly switches to Gail, who must now ride Apollo, her greatest worry.
Apollo's got to take care of her.
Despite, or perhaps because of, Gail's light weight and gentle approach, Apollo doesn't look too difficult. And amazingly, she jumps a third clear round to take a 2-fence lead.
0 punkter, clear round, 100 punkter.
The crowd are wild with excitement. There's only 1 round to go, but nothing can be certain. Conrad is first with Mr. T. The horses settle down again, and he jumps a beautiful clear round to end on 8 faults. Nick, stopped with Mr. T, has dashed his hopes. But he also jumps clear with Abdullah. Gail is the last to go. Can she jump a 4th clear round on Japalou, with his unpredictable temperament? In fact, she can afford to have 1 fence down, but only 1, if she is to take the title of world champion on her first international trip.
Where's my coach?
Einzelwertung den Preis der Stadt Aachen. Sieger und Goldmedaille. Gail Greenough, Kanada mit Mr. T.
To drive a team of 4 horses is a wonderful experience. I love to do it. To me, it's all absorbing. It gives a wonderful feeling of power. In actual fact, we've hardly seen anyone retire from driving and seem to want to drive 4 horses until they die.
Four-in-hand driving is one of the newest equestrian sports. Yet over 15 countries now compete at the World Championships. George Bowman, 8 times the national champion, is probably the best-known British competitor.
Well, I've always been brought up with horses, riding horses and all kinds of horses, but I only got involved into driving through an accident I had at work, which temporarily sort of paralysed me down one side. And because I thought I'd never ride again, I started driving, but I never dreamt I'd be driving competitions at that time. Driving is the fastest growing equine sport. It's a family sport, and it pulls people together. It makes the people work as a team. I love it. I love every second of it. The social side is very nice. There are some very nice people involved.
I got into it in a very roundabout way. I happened to be president of the International Equestrian Federation, and it was suggested to me that we ought to have some international rules for carriage driving, because up until then each country had its own rules, and it was quite active in Hungary and in Germany. They had a lot of competitions. And so I put a committee together and I said, go away and think about this. And really their suggestion was that the competition should be based on the 3-day riding event, the badminton horse trials. And so we decided to do that, and we put the first draft rules on some Roneoed paper, and in 1969 the Swiss offered to run the first international competition under these rules. And that took off from there. The very first thing is the presentation. The judges look at the whole turnout, the carriage and the horses and the grooms, to see that they're clean and well groomed, and that the harness and the carriage are technically correct in every way. And then immediately after that, there's what's known as the dressage competition, which is basically a series of compulsory figures which you have to execute within an arena. The main competition is on the second day, which is a cross-country competition in 5 sections. The last section has 8 what we call in English hazards, which are so designed that there are a number of different ways you can go through them, and each competitor is timed into the penalty zone and out of the penalty zone, having completed the compulsory gates, as it were, within each obstacle. On the final day, there's the equivalent of the show jumping, but of course it isn't really very practical to get 4 horses in a carriage to jump anything, so that we have them going between sets of plastic cones, which are set at about a foot wider than the track width of the carriage. And you have to negotiate them in exactly the same way as a show jumping course. I'd given up polo just at about the time in which these rules were being written, and I thought I might as well try something else. And as we had ponies in the horses rather, in the mews here, I thought I'd see how they went. I didn't know anything about it. The horses certainly didn't know anything about it. And fortunately, very few other competitors knew much about it. And so I got in really on the ground floor, which was, and grew up with the sport. I think it'd be very much more difficult for people to take it up now, because the standard has improved almost every year.
The skill in driving 4 horses has been recognized for centuries. But it wasn't until the turn of the century in Paris that 4-in-hand driving began to be taught as an art rather than a trade. Today's competition drivers are keeping old traditions alive.
We have a saying in Cumberland that men over 6 feet and horses over 16 hands are no good for work. I always used to quote this. Now 2 of my horses are 17 hands, so I'm going against my preachings, but you need the power on the wheel. If you're going to drive tight obstacles, you've got to have power. And the 2-wheelers have got to be strong, good collared horses. Oh, stand. What happens, you see, if your leader's going to draft, he just pulls the pole over, you can't steer. So you've got to get your leaders, as you come from an as, you've got to pull your leader range back a foot or so, get your leaders completely out of draft, and then drive your wheelers. Up. It's very easy to make a horse do things if you can touch him. You know, if you can give all of these circus people or horses do tricks, if you can touch your horse, give him a cue, he'll respond quite easily. But to make a horse work on the voice alone is difficult. And this is why, when it comes to driving, especially the further away you move from the horse, the more difficult it is to control him on the voice. Get. It's very important to know your horses and for your horses to know you and know your voice. I mean, so you can carry on a conversation or a carriage and the horse won't take any notice then, but he knows when you speak to him. The commands I give my horses are really old Cumberland horse sayings, what they used to give to the plough horses. You know, you'd say, right, come round, come over, get over. Come is to the right and get is to the left. Come. Come. Get. Up, get. Hurry. Get. Steady, they're just a bar, steady. Used to that rattle up, steady. You want words with different tones, you see. If you use two words that were similar, the horse would get mixed up. Allez. I use the French word allez, go, which is straight ahead. Get. Back. You come to back a team, you don't really pull the reins, you want to just back them on the voice. Back. Oh, get over. Back. But if you pull them, one will come back a bit quicker than the other than a twist because your pole comes over that inch too much. So if you get them both just coming back quietly on the word back. You know. Back, whoa. Get a bed. This is a nice big horse. It's called goulash. And of course, as you know, goulash is an Hungarian stew. And he was a lazy horse, actually, till I called him goulash. No, he shout goulash and immediately he comes alive. Well, I think he's frightened he's going into the goulash. That's what it is. Here, pay attention. Give me Yankee. Wave it. No, pick it up. Give it to me. Ta. Thank you. Atta boy. When you're working young horses, you go out every day and you can see the horse slowly improving. And it makes training interesting. Come! I like training young horses, and this is why I change teams regular. I don't think it's a good thing as regards winning competitions, but it certainly makes training more fun. Training doesn't become dull if you're schooling young horses. Come! I don't like putting a complete green team together, so you probably keep one key horse, or even two horses to train two young ones. And do that next year. I'll probably have two young ones and two old ones next year, then the year after have four completely. You get very attached to your horses. It's a very sad thing when you have to sell one or part with one. Come here. How about to sell you? No. Say no. But no. That's it. Everybody who competes likes to win, but to me, if I had to drive the same team year in and year out and win everything, I'd soon lose interest. I'd rather stay at home and drive young horses.
The Hungarians, with their long driving tradition, have always shown exceptional skill in this sport. The Bugat stud, southeast of Budapest, has specialized for 20 years in breeding horses for team driving, and some of the best young drivers have been trained here, including Laszlo Juhász, a former world champion.
Since I became a world champion, the pressure is greater. I have to work harder and travel more. Now everyone wants to beat me. I'm totally in charge of the horse's routine. But we don't have such a wide choice as Westerners, with different kinds of feed, vitamins and so on. It's no use saying, give them lucerne hay, if we only have meadow hay. I do enjoy the sport, but I worry a lot as well. Maybe I do it because I love horses. It becomes a passion. In the West, a millionaire gentleman can suddenly decide to put a team together and go to competitions, no matter what the cost. My horses belong to the cooperative farm. I'll never have enough money to compete with my own four in hand. I'm not a factory owner. The cooperative buys the carriages, the horses, everything. They pay me and they own my house. We do win money abroad, but that goes to the sports organization, which arranges our travel and takes care of the foreign currency. The prize money goes to them. We just get our daily expenses, and that's more than enough. The Hungarian style of driving is quite different from the Western. The English put collars on their horses. The Hungarians use a breast harness. Traditionally, the English drive with all four reins in one hand, a four in hand. We Hungarians buckle the left pair and the right pair together and hold two reins in each hand. In Hungary, the carriage horse type is usually the Lipizzaner, but I don't like them much. I prefer the quick half-bred horses. They are part Hungarian trotter, part thoroughbred. Tourists bring in half our income. They come to see our horses and our Hungarian grey cattle. In the season, we give 2 or 3 displays a day, and last year we had 60,000 visitors. Anyone who thinks it's easy to get 4 horses to work together should have a go themselves. It's real work. Strength is important, of course, but you need more than that. To get your horses to go the way you want, you need brains, quick hands and good reflexes. In competition, we Hungarians don't do so well in the presentation and dressage. We lose penalty points compared to the Westerners. So we have to try and catch up in the marathon and the obstacle driving. People criticize us for being too tough on our horses, but today, if you want to win, you really have to take risks. You need courage and some Hungarian flair. This year I'm driving a completely new team, so I'm not likely to be a world champion again, but I hope I'll be among the medals.
In the United States, interest in the sport is growing rapidly after a late start. Enthusiasm and attention to detail make up for a lack of competitive experience. Among the top drivers is one of the few women competing at international level.
In Europe anyway, most of the team drivers are men, and most of the men have the money in Europe, and it is a fairly expensive sport. I also quite honestly feel that most men don't like the having their wives be the main competitor in the family. I saw Cynthia Hayden from England driving up in Toronto at the Royal Winter Fair, and I was so excited by the splendor and the brass and the polish and the patent leather and the glamour of it all that I immediately decided I had to start driving a team.
Thank you.
I liked the idea of team driving, and it was fun, and it gives you a high. And it does take a certain amount of skill, but it doesn't require the same athletic ability that riding does, especially high-level riding. And I think you can achieve a fair amount of success starting when you're grown up. I use a mixed pack of horses. I don't know anybody else who's driving 3 breeds of horses in their team, and I suppose it's not the thing to do. I have to have horses that have the right dispositions for me, and that means that they have to be quite tractable, not pull, and they have to wait for me when I'm in trouble. And that's perhaps one of the differences between me and some of the men drivers. They care more about the looks of the horses and the fact that they match than they do about the disposition. I believe this sport requires less ability from the horse, but more endurance and more teamwork between the animals, and certainly a very great degree of teamwork between the horses and the driver. That is the challenge of the sport, the achievement of getting 4 horses, sound, fit, conditioned, and trained and responsive to do the same job at the same time. The other countries are very strong. The Hungarians and the Dutch are particularly strong at the moment. But we hope this year that the Americans will have a very good showing. We have Bill Long, who's a star and has the ability to win a medal individually, I think, and can certainly put out a very good marathon.
To me, this is a real challenge. I work very hard at it, and I try very hard to do well at it, and my dressage is still needs a lot more, but we're working at that. And yeah, I think someday that, as far as the United States goes, that we're going to have some of the best drivers in the world there.
Bill Long manages a farm in New Jersey, owned by top businessman Finn Casperson, and drives his team of Holstein horses. He's the most successful team driver in the States, and his aggressive style in the marathon took him to 7th place in the 1984 World Championships.
Okay, Billy, if you want to take the mare out, Karina, you want to take Meister?
My horse used to be so stiff and they wouldn't bend, and then with the single driving they really started to work and enjoy it. In our last event, it was the first dressage test that I have ever won, and I know it's because of the single driving.
Roscoe, come.
Come. Roscoe. Come. Come. Good boy. Good.
I have one lead horse that doesn't like the water at all. So I'm trying to get him over that. You know, wherever I can find a piece of water to put him in, I'll put him in it.
Come. Come.
He knows you're behind him, and he knows that you can reach him with that whip if he's not doing what you want him to. And then he responds when you get back in the team. You say his name, and he says, uh-oh, he hasn't figured out yet that I can't get to him.
Ooh, it's too mucky. Oh. Oh, good boy. Oh.
I don't know how to explain it, but the horses really do respond a lot better after driving pairs and singles. Then you put them in the 4. I train hazards usually once a week. I have hazards on the farm that have 14 or 15 openings. They have to go in the opening. I want them to go in.
Good boy. Come. Come.
I try to really settle them because they know if something's going to happen, maybe into or halfway through it. It's a very dangerous sport, but if you let that bother you, you may as well quit. A lot of times in the water, the horses have a tendency, they go in and they jump, like jump forward, like hopping in the water, and that's what happens. They usually get a trace in between their legs, or the wheelers jump over the lead bars, and that's when you're in big trouble. You almost have to stop most of the time to get them off. It's dangerous if you make it dangerous. If you get too gung-ho and a little bit too crazy with the horses sometimes, then you've made it yourself. You've done it yourself. It usually happens in a hazard if you come in a little too fast and you don't catch quite the right angle you want to be at. All it has to do is hit that post hard enough, and there's no way you can stay on. You go. I've been nervous. There's been some hazards where I've thought twice about it. But when you're with the horses, I feel really relaxed and at ease with them because I know my horses. But now if it was another team and they asked me to get up and drive a team that I didn't know, then it would make me nervous. There are horses that have a tendency to take off with you once in a while if something spooks them bad enough. When you start cantering your horses, like in these hazards, when we let them go, you're hoping that they respond to you and want to come back and not just keep on going. Because it's a very hard thing to get 4 horses stopped if they don't want to stop. My father had a saying, like he always told me, he says, I don't care what you do, Bill, but never let go of those horses. You can ride on that carriage as fast as they can run. There's some cases where there's 4 horses are going with it and they're coming to a rock wall and they're going to go through it or over it or through the trees. Then it's time probably to bail out. You got to have that win attitude, or else you just paddle along out there and coming in out of 25 teams, coming 25th. Because you won't be a winner unless you have that attitude, I think.
come. That's my baby.
I never had a team this fast, and I think that will pay off.
The American team fly to England for 5 days of intensive competition at Ascot Racecourse. Each driver must bring 5 horses, 2 carriages, several grooms, and tons of equipment.
Oh, yeah, wait
The Europeans have competitions almost every weekend. It becomes second nature to you. You're competing every weekend. It's your whole existence. You don't panic anymore. No one show is very, very important. Zelstra or Bowman, they compete in maybe 16 competitions a year. And we're lucky if we have 4. For us, each one is a big deal. That's difficult. It makes it much harder for us to be good competitors.
Over 40 competitors from 13 different countries gather in the arena for the opening of the World 4-in-Hand Carriage Driving Championships. The competition begins with the presentation, a meticulous assessment of the cleanliness, condition, and general appearance of each team. Prince Philip enters the ring, driving a team of the Queen's ceremonial horses immaculately prepared in the royal stables. Five judges inspect every detail of the turnout.
They're checking to see that the harness is strong, that it's supple, that it's clean, and that it fits correctly. The condition of the horses, the shoeing of the horses, the carriage, of course, it's the same. They're checking to see that it's in a safe condition. And then he checks your grooms to see they're smart. And then he stands back and looks at the overall thing to see that it all blends in together. Money does come to it, because if you can hire extra grooms to clean, if you can buy the best horses, buy the best harness, buy the best vehicle, of course money comes into it. I love personally to watch, at an international event, watch the presentation, because it's seeing the different breeds of horses from different countries, the different uniforms or the different outfits from various countries, and I find this very interesting myself.
After every stage of the competition, the placings are calculated on a basis of penalty points. At the end of the presentation, none of the leading drivers have lost more than 1 or 2 marks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the first of the teams for the dressage section, competition A, and this is team number 6, individual from Great Britain, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
Prince Philip has been a member of many successful British teams since 1975, but this time he's competing as an individual. He salutes the judges before starting on the 11 separate movements of the dressage test.
I think Prince Philip is remarkable. To be able to compete as well as he does with as little time as he has to devote to the sport is an absolute marvel. He is very dedicated, and I think he spends a great deal of time thinking about it. And I'm a great believer in mind control and in being able to practice when you're a long way from the horses. And I suspect, whether he does it consciously or not, that he practices a lot in his mind.
Prince Philip always does a very accurate test. He's quite noted for it, and his horses, especially the leaders, his own bred horses, have got wonderful paces. This is a big problem. If you get horses fit enough to do 18 miles cross-country, will they be cool enough and have the right temperament to do a calm dressage? is difficult remembering movements because you're concentrating so hard on your horses. And when you've got 4 horses to concentrate on, people get what they call mental blocks. They forget what they've done, not exactly what they're going to do. They forget what they've just done, you see, so that they then don't know what the next move is. And this happens quite frequently.
What we say in driving is if you have good hands, quiet and soft with your horses, because once you get tense, your hands get tense and the horses feel it right away. It's like vibrations going right to them. Good hands in driving is the main thing.
After 1 day of presentation and 2 days of dressage, the Dutch hold a narrow lead over the Hungarians. But the championship is still wide open, with the marathon yet to come.
That's the start, yeah.
We're going down the far side of the course.
He's way down that way, isn't it? Start here.
All the competitors must choose between the quicker, more difficult routes or the slower but easier options through the testing hazards of the marathon course.
Well, we try and build them so if they hit them, which I know some of the competitors take a great delight in doing, is that they don't give way. In other words, their carriages get bent instead. We've used big timbers and they're down 4 foot in the ground. And hopefully they're going to stand up on the day. The only thing is, if they break off at ground level, then you're in trouble. When the course is open, you start to get a bit of feedback. We take a fair amount of stick over it, but very often, in fact, the hazards I build drive a lot easier than they look, because I give people escape routes to get out.
Come in. Come that way to give yourself the swing. It's very crucial that you memorise these hazards so that you know exactly where you're going, because you have to place your horses to within an inch, really.
The one on the bank, that one will cause problems. And if they do get their angles wrong, attacking the gates, then they are going to get into trouble, there's no doubt about that.
A lot of people think it looks a little easy. It's not easy, not this one. The hole fills up quite quick with 4 horses in that little gap.
No.
The competitions themselves are great fun because it's a sort of great family occasion. It's people who have a common interest in driving and in horses. We all meet together, and it's a great sort of mobile weekend party because the same people tend to meet at every competition, and people get to know each other, and it's a most entertaining way of life.
Well, it's absolutely lovely because you've got 14 nations, 14 I think it is, competing. And everybody, you know, you can walk down these boxes down here and they'll call you in and ask you for a glass of wine, and you could walk down there and by the time you got to the end you'd be drunk. I don't think there's any other sport that brings people together, you know, from all walks of life. We've been doing it now for about 12 years, 13 years, and I've enjoyed every moment of it.
On the day of the marathon, the drivers set off at intervals on an 18-mile journey along roads and tracks and across country. The course is divided into 5 sections to be walked or trotted at set average speeds. Cantering or galloping are not allowed, except within the hazards, and a referee sits beside the driver, giving penalty points for any break of pace. Further down the course, the first competitor is already tackling the water hazard.
I love a marathon. You know, to me, that's what it's all about. And that's the most enjoyable part. It's probably the only part where you're not suffering from nerves. It's just a wonderful feeling. Like, you know, let's get out there and enjoy the drive.
Laszlo Juhas is finishing the fast trotting section. At over 12 miles an hour, this is only just possible without incurring penalties for exceeding the time allowed. The marathon is a test of endurance as well as skill. If the horses are not at the peak of fitness, they'll be too tired after the roads and tracks to negotiate the final hazards.
Well, we started on the marathon and the horses were in full of beans, especially the stallion, and he was on springs, you know. And about 3 parts around section A, he started to sweat, which was unusual because he never sweats. And I said to him, groom, I said, it's not right, that horse. I could feel, you know, when you drive horses every day, you can feel when they're not right. And when we got to the end of the walk, he was distressed. And I called the vet up to have a look at him, and he's got colic.
We always wind up taking the shortcuts. I'm not a crasher or a banger or anything like that. It's just that we wind up where we have to go those short ways, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're off!
The walk sections must be driven at nearly 5 miles an hour, a fast walk for some breeds of horse.
In the past, people drove high-stepping horses. It wasn't for sure, this was a safety factor. The horses that picked the knees up didn't trip.
This is the way how the grooms bounce around.
A lot of people, myself included, we were experimenting, crossing different breeds, trying to get a perfect competition driving horse, one that has elegance and paces to do dressage, yet still has stamina and strength to do a marathon.
Le deuxième obstacle avec 1 minute 26 secondes, ça fait 12,2 points de pénalité.
Prince Philip, with his horses going well, approaches the end of the course.
The horses have to cooperate. They have to know what they're expected to do. It's not like a motor car. You can't sort of press buttons and turn handles. They have to rely on you, and you have to rely on them. So there's a lot of compatibility about it. And that can only come through getting to know them as individuals. In fact, most of the time you're going around psychoanalyzing each horse in turn, because one horse doesn't like blue plastic, and another one doesn't like waving branches, another one doesn't like pigs, and another one doesn't like trees. And so you constantly have to sort of think, well, now what's going to happen next? You've got to understand the mentality and the characteristics of each of the horses in your team.
I think we've now got to a stage where we are driving literally miniature tanks with aluminium wheels or steel wheels and all steel chassis and frames for strength. I think we might see a change in the rules to stop these people who are crashing, literally smashing their way through the obstacle.
Next of the first hazard, number 2 from Czechoslovakia.
I don't have as much strength as some drivers do, particularly some of the younger men have a good deal more strength. So I have to rely on the horses having learned to do what I tell them to do with my voice as well as with the reins.
Every carriage must carry a navigator and a groom, who often play a vital role maintaining the stability of the carriage with their own body weight. Bill Long, with owner Finn Casperson riding as groom and navigator, comes up to the final hazard.
Meister! Come! Get out of here!
Bill comes through into third place in the marathon, only a few points behind the Dutchman. This is his best ever performance in a world championship. With Deirdre Pirrie, he takes the American team into fourth position, just within reach of a medal.
I thought the whole marathon really went well. And the horses were just working so super today. You know, it's a lucky day. It was luck. A lot of it there. And there's a couple places we could have really been stuck bad, but we got lucky. Well, but no, I really felt good about the marathon, and everything went well.
I was very pleased with the marathon. Hazards went a bit slower than I'd hoped for, but it rode very smooth. It was a nice course, fun course to drive.
Today I think it went very well for me, of course, because otherwise I wouldn't have won the competition. But the hazards weren't too difficult for us, because in Holland we are used to very tight hazards, and that's the reason I think that we Dutch people are ahead at the moment.
The pleasure for me is to get round without a disaster of any kind. If I win, it's a sort of bonus, but I suppose I'm really rather an old-fashioned amateur in that sense, that I enjoy the competition rather than the winning.
I don't just say to you, I'll give you a little
It's a new sport, it's a small sport. And in the past, it's been like one big family. Everybody knows everybody, everybody helps everybody. And we always had parties and we had fun. But it's going to slowly change because of the sponsorship coming in. There's more money coming in. People are giving more money for carriages, they're giving more money for horses. And when this happens, then professionalism comes in and they take it more serious and they have to win. And I think we'll slowly see a lot of friendliness disappear.
The final day of the event. With the dangers of the marathon behind them, the competitors are back in the arena in full regalia for the cone driving.
It was designed originally to prove that the horses were still sound and supple after doing an 18-mile marathon, to come out and be able to do the cones.
Drivers must guide their teams through pairs of cones set only slightly wider than the wheels of each carriage. The cones are made of light plastic, and each has a ball balanced on top, which falls if the cone is touched, to give 5 penalties.
Ten penalties on the obstacles for William Long, member of the American team. No time penalties. Takes his score up to 130.
Bill Long and Deirdre Pirrie both have 2 knockdowns, so the American team remain in 4th place. Laszlo Juhas drives a clear round to win the individual bronze medal, leaving 2 Dutchmen to battle for the gold and silver. There are only 4 points between these two. The first, Chardon, must now drive a clear round to secure the silver medal and to stand a chance of winning the whole event.
Very important clear round now for Iceman Chardon for the Dutch team. So he will hold on to his
silver medal place. And all the pressure now on...
Velstra is the last to drive. A single mistake, and his teammate will win the individual gold.
First place, with only 4 points in hand, so he can't knock anything down. So there you go, the gold medal winning Velstra with that beautiful clear round.
But Velstra drives clear and becomes the new world four-in-hand driving champion.
Ancient art of harness racing.
Nothing better, you know, it's the greatest sport in the world, I think.
You know, there's nothing else in the world that I'd ever want to do.
It's great. It gets in your blood, and you got to like it.
This is a life, to be in this sport. It's not to go to work and go home. This is a life.
$105,000, thank you. 40 is Kev Lobel, New York eligible.
At the Lana Lobel yearling sales in New Jersey, 140 future harness horses are selling for an average of $50,000 apiece. 4 bid spotters are kept busy by owners and trainers who've come here from all over the country and even from abroad. Among the buyers is stockbroker Lou Guider. He's won $30 million in 8 years, making him the most successful owner in the world.
I bought one horse so far today. Hip number 39 was a Niatros colt. His name is Night in Dixie. He's a baby, untried, untested, 105,000.
It's a huge gamble. It's just like going to Vegas or Atlantic City. I mean, that's about the chance that you have.
More than 30 countries around the world have some form of racing in harness. In North America, where over $5 billion are placed in bets every year, the sport rivals flat racing as a business.
At 265.
The Lana LaBelle Farm is one of the best breeding centres in the world, and the total revenue from today's sale will exceed $7 million. All the horses are specially bred to race, either as trotters or as pacers. The trot is a diagonal gait where the hind and front legs on opposite sides hit the ground together. Although the gait is natural to horses, it takes long hours of training and great skill from the drivers to keep them trotting at racing speeds. And the slightest imbalance will cause them to go on a break into a canter, and be instantly disqualified. The other gait, the pace, is artificial for the horse, natural only to giraffes and camels. It's a lateral gait where hind and front legs on the same side come down together, enabling the horse to travel slightly faster than at a trot. Indeed, top pacers reach speeds of 35 miles an hour, almost as fast as a thoroughbred can gallop. Horses which have been bred to pace often do so as youngsters in the field before they have ever seen a harness. But most of them wear leather hobbles, attaching both legs on the same side to prevent them from breaking pace. In Europe, there are very few pacers, but in America they represent 80% of the horses racing today. Trainers usually stick to either trotters or pacers, although drivers will work with both. Double-gated horses are extremely rare. Nowadays, the big races all use the mobile starting gate, which allows the horses to line up whilst on the move. The car does not wait for the horses. It's up to the driver to get his horse as close as possible to the car as it crosses the starting line. The barrier placings are drawn before the race. But once they're off, the drivers vie for the best positions, aiming for the inside rail without getting boxed in. A horse is parked out if he can't get to the rail. If he's up front and still on the outside, he's in the death seat. Every driver must know the abilities of the other runners, and it is said that the greatest skill in racing lies in gauging exactly when to make your run. Most horses, whether sprinters or stayers, have an extra burst of speed in them. The trick is knowing how and when to turn it on. The Meadowlands Racetrack, New York, August. Crowds of around 32,000 are arriving for the most prestigious race of the harness racing year, the Hambletonian for 3-year-old male trotters. The Hambletonian is said by many to be the toughest horse race of all, harder to win than the Grand National or the Derby. The horses are divided into 2 heats, and to win the title, a horse must run 2, if not 3 races on the same afternoon. From November up till August, the top trotters in the country, and even some from abroad, have been training to peak for this $1 million race.
In America, you know, it's the #1 race. If you ask any driver, trainer, owner, what race they want to win, it's the Hambletonian.
Harness racing is usually a night sport, but the Hambletonian is held at midday, and the August heat will add to the toughness of the race. In North America alone, $400 million are awarded in prizes every year, and the winner of the Hambletonian gets $500,000, split 90% to the owner and 5% each to trainer and driver. John Campbell, driver of the favourite today, is one of 3 men who've topped 50 million in career winnings.
I've made over 54 million in purses. I've been very fortunate with the money, but I would be doing something in harness racing. If I couldn't drive, I'd be training for somebody else or working with them somehow. So it's more than money that lures you to it.
John Campbell is probably, right now, is the leading driver in the country in America. And, you know, he's just fortunate that he's able to get along with each and every horse that he drives.
John Campbell is just a talented man. I just can't explain it. He's like a great artist. He's poetry in motion.
He doesn't have to warm up a horse. The very first time he gets on a horse, just by scoring him down once, he gets the feel of the horse.
John Campbell's Hambletonian runner is trained in the stables of Chuck Sylvester and is something of a phenomenon. Bought as a yearling from the Lana LaBelle Farms by Lou Guida for a bargain price of $17,000, the stallion Mac LaBelle looks set to be one of the greatest trotters this century has seen.
I had no idea that he was going to be the horse that he is. As a matter of fact, I bought a lot more expensive horses that I thought would be better than him. But he fit into my plans, but I had no idea that he would be this good. And there was nothing special about him as a young. I just loved Mystic Park, and I wanted to buy one of his sons.
Mystic Park, Mac LaBelle's sire, was an exceptional trotter. But he broke stride in his bid for the Hambletonian as a 3-year-old and was retired to stud. Then he came down with Potomac fever and foundered. 2 of his hooves fell off, and the other 2 had to be surgically removed. Any normal horse in this state would have been put down, but Mystic Park's insurance had somehow been forgotten, and the project Save Mystic Park was begun. For 6 months, the horse, unable to stand, was turned from side to side by his mane, or hung in a sling and lowered into a swimming pool. Slowly, his hooves grew back, and his recovery was celebrated at Halloween by dressing him up as a unicorn and feeding him cake and champagne.
Well, he does have a fighting spirit. It's a miracle he is alive. He grew all 4 feet back. He is potentially very healthy. He's one heck of an animal.
Mac LaBelle was from Mystic Park's first crop of foals.
Mac LaBelle is a great animal. He's a thrill for me to drive. He just does everything you have asked him so far this year. We're hoping he does today. He's the best horse that I've ever driven. He's got tremendous athletic ability, and his manners are impeccable. If we can stay away from bad racing luck, he's going to be awful hard to beat.
He's just developed into an exceptional horse. He just has more ability than any horse I've ever been around.
Perhaps, surprisingly, neither Chuck Sylvester, John Campbell, nor Lou Guida have ever won the Hambletonian before. Mac LaBelle goes into the first heat as odds-on favourite, at 1-20. The other drivers know that this is the horse to beat.
And here they come for the first division of the first heat of the Hambletonian, and they're off. And Mac LaBelle is out quickly for the lead from the outside, and Sir Taurus is moving with him early, and Besieged is out fast toward the rail. The field rounds the first turn, and it's Sir Taurus who's up for the lead. Mac LaBelle was 3 wide in the early going, and John Campbell's looking for the lead with them now, and the opening quarter was quick, 27-4, and they move into the backstretch, and Mac LaBelle powers up to take the lead now. The 3/4 mark was 1:26 flat, and it's Mac LaBelle, the leader at the top of the stretch by a length and a half. John Campbell driving him confidently with 1/8 of a mile to come. Spotlight LaBelle is full out to try to get him. Then farther back, Besieged is racing 3rd. On the inside, Sir Taurus is 4th. Mac LaBelle impressive here, and he's pulling away with the field with complete authority. Mac LaBelle has won it by 5 widening lengths, and the time was 1:54 flat. That is a Hambo record, and it ties the track record.
In the second heat, the favourite is Napolitano, driven by Bill O'Donnell, who's won over 10 million in a single season and is known as the Magic Man for his knack of winning races with any horse.
It's not magical ability, it's horse sense, you know, growing up around him and just kind of thinking like a horse sometimes.
And they're off, and Crown Sweep is on a break as the field moves for the first turn, and Cotton Hanover, with a quick early move, angles over to the inside to grab the rail in the early lead. Napolitano gets the pocket early, and Go Get Lost is now parked out 3rd. Up the backstretch, Go Get Lost now has taken the lead. Napolitano coming after him from the outside. Napolitano now taking over. Go Get Lost now yields and races 2nd. Cotton Hanover, the early leader, is now back settled in 3rd. The field turns for home. home. Napolitano holding on to a short lead. Go Get Lost is full out to stay with them, but Napolitano puts it in another gear in mid-stretch, and he's opened up now by 2.5 lengths. He's now in front by 3.5 on the inside. Cotton Hanover now driving hard in second. Go Get Lost has dropped out of it on the outside. Waikiki Beach, and they're coming to the finish, and it's going to be Napolitano to win it decisively. The final time was 1:56.
In the next round, the first 5 horses from each heat race again. A double win for Mac LaBelle or Napolitano will decide the title. But if another horse wins, all 3 must run yet again.
And here they come for the second and perhaps deciding heat of the Hambletonian 1987, and they're off, and Waikiki Beach leaves quickly. And Mac LaBelle now takes the lead as the field moves into the turn, and Napolitano has the pocket early. Waikiki Beach and Mac LaBelle, they hook up in a speed duel down the backstretch, and Napolitano is stalking them. Third, Waikiki Beach on a break, and it's Mac LaBelle, the leader in the Hambletonian by 3 lengths. And Napolitano is trying to catch him as they come into the final 8, and the others are far back. It's Mac LaBelle, and he's pouring it on. Mac LaBelle in front now by 4 or 5. Napolitano is never going to catch him. The others are far back. Here is a brilliant trotter and a brilliant performance. Mac LaBelle has won the Hambletonian in 1:53.3, a sensational time, a new record.
We're going to fill this up with beer later. Right here, Delvin. Right here for you.
The roots of harness racing lie in the chariot races of the ancient Greeks and Romans, which were the first Olympic equestrian sport. The strange notion of racing at a trot evolved in the 18th century, as families trotting home tried to outdo each other. Then the British stallion Messenger came to America and started a new trotting breed of horse, the standardbred. Organised races at country fairs became popular, usually ridden, till the 1870s when the jockeys turned to gallopers, leaving trotters to pull sulkies.
Somebody been on the bay.
Mounted trotting races still exist today at some European tracks, but they are notoriously difficult to ride. The sport was immensely popular in the 1800s, and in 1849 the famous Hambletonian was born, after whom the race is named. He sired 1,330 sons, and today 95% of all American harness horses are his direct descendants. Pacers now came on the scene. Unpopular at first, since it was hard for horses that broke stride to come back to a pace. Then, hobbles were invented, initially scorned, but widely adopted once they were seen to work.
Running a race with a shooting star. Oh, day.
The best horses in the sport were celebrated animals, and none more so than Dan Patch, who raced at the turn of the century. As well as setting new records, Dan Patch drew crowds of 60,000 and became a household name along with his owner, Mr. Savage. Dan Patch gave his name to makes of toys, tobacco, dance steps, and even washing machines, as well as his own progeny.
Then repeat, oh, do-da day. I win my money on the bobtail nag. Do-da, do-da. I keep my money in an old tool bag. Oh,
around this time, efforts were made to improve sulky design. Sometimes ridiculous, and sometimes effective in increasing speeds. But the advent of the motor car spelt bad times for the sport, although enthusiasts continued racing undeterred in all weather conditions. the continent, horses even raced on the beaches.
At Germany's seaside resort of Cuxhaven, it's the Mother's Day Stakes. Nobody's out to beat the races, they're out to beat the heat. It was just too hot to get the people to the track, so they brought the track where the people were, cooling off in the briny. And if anyone complains there's something fishy about this, it makes sense.
It was not until the 1940s that the sport leapt back into prominence, when pari mutuel betting was approved and night racing was instituted.
Thousands swarm into the stands every night. Crowds of 40,000 are not uncommon. Surroundings as plush as those of a big resort hotel.
The sport really took off with the invention of the mobile starting gate, under various different guises.
The field is in motion. And they're off.
There is no question that today, without the support of the betting public, the sport would hardly exist. Every major track has its own betting hall, crowded with fans on racing nights. In the States, over 30 million people attend the races each year. And on a normal night at the Meadowlands track, there are some 12,000 fans betting an average of $160 each.
Napolitano is never going to catch him. The others are far back. Here is a brilliant trotter and a brilliant performance. Mac Lobel has won the Hambletonian in 1:53.
In order to protect the public and the good name of the sport, harness racing around the world is governed by strict rules aimed at controlling drivers' conduct both on and off the course, and at preventing unfair use of drugs and equipment.
There are a group of us at the Meadowlands, a group of veterinarians that are responsible for testing the horses before they race. We test their blood. Any type of drug is absolutely not permitted. Any horse that does come up positive is scratched. At the same time, there's a veterinarian examining the horses for lameness as they warm up for their heats.
Drivers are also subject to breathalyzer and urine tests before they race, and even the vets or racing officials may be called for testing without warning. All the trotting races in Europe are followed by a steward's van, which watches for breaks in stride that may be unnoticeable from the stands. As well as this, most racetracks have their own video system to film the races, which are then checked by the stewards for any untoward incidents. But neither vets nor stewards can always prevent things from going wrong. Ever since horses were first harnessed to carts, accidents have been inevitable, and the racetracks have their share of upsets.
There's a definite danger in the sport. I've been in quite a few wrecks, and I've had one knee broken, and I've had my back operated on, and I had my other knee tore up the ligaments and cartilage. It's very dangerous when there is a wreck. The trick is trying to avoid them.
Accidents usually happen when horses go on a break, or as they leave the starting gate. In Australasia, where the sulkies are narrower and the racing tighter, the drivers are always rubbing hubs, and crashes occur more frequently. The first horse to break the $1 million earnings record came from New Zealand, and today Australasian horses, especially pacers, are beginning to rival their American counterparts. Janine Bowyer, one of 200 women drivers in Australia, competes against and often beats the best male drivers in the sport.
I've been in love with horses since I was about 6 years old. I can remember my father putting me on a horse and that was the end of me. I don't think it's a disadvantage being a woman. Originally, there was probably a little bit of harder driving towards us from the men, but definitely not now. They treat us the same as anybody else on the track. It takes a lot of mental concentration, but physically it's probably not as demanding as you might think. You'll get individual horses in the game that do require strength, but the majority of horses, it's just horsemanship whether you can handle them or not. Some you can be a bit rough with, and others, if you did that too, you'd have no chance with them. It is an expensive sport. It's hard at times. We have to have winners, otherwise we don't survive.
Getting winners is not just a question of finding and training good horses, but of persuading them to give you everything they've got when the pressure is on. Janine's horse tonight is Minute LaBelle, whose breeding traces back to the Lana LaBelle farms in New Jersey.
I haven't had Minute LaBelle very long. She's a nice going mare, she's lovely to train. I'd like to have a stable with her manners. At the start of the race, you must know what's going on around you, what the other horses can do, particularly what your own horse can do. You must know what the other drivers are like, how they drive in general. That's the whole basis of winning.
The blue light comes up, they're racing now, and out wide, Our Angel Lee, one of the fastest to begin with, Minute LaBelle and Shogun Lad, who's showing plenty of dash. And Minute LaBelle in front by a half length on For Sale. Just Kev held up for a run from Hondo, Jade, Tarport, Spider. But Minute LaBelle kicked at the top of the straight. It's Minute LaBelle, homeward bound by 2 lengths on Our Angel Lee and Grand Call. Appalooka now coming to the outside to start a run. Minute LaBelle in front, Grand Call, and here's Appalooka hitting top gear. Minute LaBelle in front, Appalooka's flying home, he raced up, they hit it. Photo, maybe Minute LaBelle, but there's not much in it.
Janine was lucky and hung onto the lead by a whisker, as Minute LaBelle fought to win.
It's a great feeling winning. It's just what makes it all worthwhile.
Owners often come into this sport not for profit, but for pleasure. Tony Price, the self-styled biggest owner in Queensland, got involved in an unorthodox way.
Well, in 1974, a friend of mine convinced me to go night trotting. We were so successful on betting on the horses that evening that I decided the next day to fly down to Brisbane. I ended up buying 9 horses and a truck and took them home, and there I was, straight into trotting in a big way in an awful hurry. And I think I've been trying to get that money back ever since. I think it became an addiction, a bit like alcohol or smoking. It certainly gets into your blood. You're always chasing that elusive champion. We get plenty of heartache and a few moments of the adrenaline pumping, and I think that's what keeps you in it. I think I'd stay in it now for probably until I die.
Tony Price's trainer is Stuart Hunter, who came into the sport late and prefers to use catch drivers than race himself.
One good thing about being in this position, we can pick the best driver at the time that's in form. I've had a few drivers in races, but with the owner the way he is, I wouldn't like to be driving any of his horses. He expects the best drivers.
Love winning. Hate coming second, just like winning.
Number one thing is a driver must be able to judge pace and have the patience. Most of the champion horses haven't had the same driver all the way through, and they just know exactly what that horse can do. They know when to pull that horse out to make its run. Putting a fresh driver up on a horse that he doesn't know, they might drive it upside down. Harness horses, they seem to take a lot more work than a thoroughbred horse. Most of them would jog 6 to 7 mile a day. I think there's about 16 or 18 of them racing continuously.
I had about 70 odd at one stage. They had a bad habit, they used to eat. And eating costs money. The way I usually put it is this: there's a lot of money in it. I got $1 million out of it. I started with 3 and ended up with 1.
Great efforts are made to vary the horses' routines so as not to bore them with endless jogging.
It's more of a science than the old method of hounding them around and around the track. The whole thing, a happy horse is a good horse.
We're swimming about 10 a day. Ones who swim might have a leg problem or they're bad winded, and swimming helps their wind, and also it's a good conditioner for building up muscle. They swim anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. When they first start off, it's a bit of a fight to get them in, but after they've gone in the first time, after that, they go good. They seem to enjoy it, especially in the summer we have here. They'd rather be going in there than jogging 6 or 7 mile on the track.
Swimming horses is a highly effective means of keeping them fit, popular throughout Australia, and especially with the trainers in Queensland where the weather is hot all the year round. John McMullen's stables are in the middle of Brisbane's industrial sector. He swims his horses every day in Breakfast Creek, risking the sharks and crocodiles which have occasionally been sighted further down the creek. Swimming also enables horses with leg injuries to keep exercising without undue strain.
That horse has got a bit of a sore leg, and the vet has advised us not to jog him because it's just going to damage his leg more. In this way, he won't lose too much time.
Since they can't be turned out in paddocks, the horses in John's stables are put on the horse walker for 15 or 20 minutes every day, just to get them out of their stalls. Sprains are treated with lasers, which penetrate the injury and heal the horse in a remarkably short time. And as a standard procedure, all horses which have raced the night before or trained hard that morning are given a salt drench. This goes straight into the belly and replaces the salts or electrolytes which the horse may have lost through sweat. In complete contrast to John's urban setup are the stables of Kevin Thomas, Brisbane's leading trainer-driver. Unlike America, 90% of Australian drivers train their own horses.
It's a disadvantage if you don't train and drive, because when you're driving the horse you know his problems, where it's hard to get a driver to tell you what's wrong with the horse if you're just a trainer.
The yearlings here are always trained in threes, which gets them used to tight racing situations right from the word go.
You try a lot of yearlings to find one that can win a race, let alone find the champion. The champion's got to be very versatile, be able to lead, be able to get parked. They're very few and far between.
Kevin will drive close to 1,000 races every year, only half the number of the top American drivers, but working for 3 times as many hours per day.
I wouldn't be in unless I could win. I wouldn't get up and work horses I couldn't win, that's for sure, because it's a 7-day-a-week job and you only get out of it what you put in it. You don't get home from the races until, 12 to 12:30, and you've got to start again at 5. It's not a very good lie. I don't think I'd be getting up to work horses that couldn't win.
Horses can't be maintained at maximum fitness indefinitely, and the trainers must plan to make them peak for the big races. Albion Park is one of Australia's premier tracks, offering a variety of ways to enjoy the racing. The upstairs restaurant provides a gourmet buffet overlooking the track, while downstairs there are the hot dogs and bookies. In tonight's big race, one of the best bets is Tony Price's brilliant new mare, Hyperstat.
And I've been talking to Stuart about a better class of horse, and I thought, well, there's no place to start at the top, so I thought I'd go and buy the best mare here in Australia.
She is the best mare that's raced in the last 10 years. She's got now into the class where she races the best geldings and stallions in Australia. She must be something exceptional to be able to do that.
Kevin Thomas also has a runner in the big race, Henry Luca.
Henry Luca's a really nice horse. He's not a champion in my books because he can't lead, but he's handy to have around. We brought him as a yearling for $5,000, and he's progressed from there. He's won something like $260,000 now.
Number 4, Henry Luca.
For all this, some critics maintain that Henry Luca isn't strong enough for such a big race. The clear favourite tonight is My Lightning Blue, winner of the toughest race in Australasia, the Inter-Dominion. He's driven and trained by Jim O'Sullivan.
My Lightning Blue, he's got a tremendous temperament. He's got a tremendous will to win. He sort of throws himself at the line. He seems to know where the winning post is, and hopefully, in the past he's always wanted to get there first, so hopefully he does the same thing tonight.
The track record for 1,609 metres. The starter, John Andrews, in the big yellow Cadillac, is calling them up behind the arms.
Right, David, boom right up onto the gate. Keep them on the gate, no dropping off, no hanging back.
They're reaching the starting point. The blue light is on, racing now, and My Lightning Blue was a half length off the machine when the starter said go. Run to the lead on the first turn. Talara Dream second, Hyperstat third. Henry Luca on the rail, and then Sovereign Cloud, followed by Sunset Candios, Cherokee Chief. I'm a Threat second last, and Manila Lover Boy had dropped back to the tail of the field. My Lightning Blue leads by a length and a half. Sovereign Cloud 3 back. My Lightning Blue leads by 2 lengths. Talara Dreams under pressure. Hyperstat trying to get off the rail, and then Paleface Bubble and Sovereign Cloud. My Lightning Blue led into the straight. Hyperstat trying to get out. My Lightning Blue in front of Hyperstat. Henry Luca's flying on the rail. Henry Luca got up on the inside. He grabbed, and I think he won. I think Henry Luca's bloused My Lightning Blue right on the line.
Henry Luca may be no lead horse, but he can certainly sprint.
You've seen an excellent race. Horses are not machines. Horses go out, their hearts are great. They're a horse you can love, a harness horse, and those horses give it their best every time.
All over Europe, harness racing is incredibly popular, with 56,000 horses starting every year. Germany, Italy, Scandinavia and France in particular produce some of the fastest horses in the world. There are very few pacers in Europe, and the trainers take a certain pride in the extra problems involved in producing a trotter.
L'art du trotteur, c'est d'aller maximum de ses possibilités dans une allure qui, au départ, n'est pas tellement la sienne, qui n'est pas une allure naturelle, d'aller maximum de sa vitesse en restant au trot, dans une allure évidemment un petit peu artificielle. Pour moi, on n'a pas besoin d'être un professionnel pour driver un paceur, parce qu'il n'y a pas d'équilibre, si vous voulez. Il suffit de leur mettre les appareils et puis bon, à cheval, il lambe. Donc c'est une question de tactique un petit peu, si vous voulez, mais pas de... Il n'y a pas l'art du professionnel.
Public attendance at the races is on the increase all over Europe, and even small countries like Sweden have superb racetracks and facilities. In terms of spectators, the sport here comes second only to football.
This sport is big for this small country, and we have a lot of good horses, a lot of stallions from the States. I think it's more difficult than flat racing because, you know, we have the sulky. And maybe the other drivers don't drive like you want them to do.
Torbjörn Jansson is one of Sweden's top drivers, living just outside Stockholm and running a huge operation, training 90 horses and racing 5 or 6 evenings a week.
To be good, you must have a very good horse. A good horse makes a good driver. We start to train our trotting horses when they are 1.5 years old and begin race when they are 3. Some horses race until they are 10, 11. We train month after month after month, and sometimes the horse will be good, sometimes he will be not. The most important thing is that the horse do what the driver wants to do. But if he don't have something in himself, he will never be good. It's important that they are fighters.
The 16th century Chateau of Grosbois, just outside Paris, was bought by the French Trotting Association in 1962, and today it's the biggest trotting centre in the world, where over 50 trainers each have a yard. The facilities are magnificent. There are 3,000 metres of roadside tracks, 30 kilometres of woody avenues, and 4 circular training tracks with an additional covered track for times of bad weather. Yearlings begin their training in long reins, getting used to the harness and shafts before they ever see a sulky. Once the youngsters are broken to harness, the trainers have the invaluable benefit of a mobile starting gate. This means they can teach the horses to trot up close to the wings and make quick getaways from the start before they ever get to the races, where there will be distractions enough. It's not only the training of the horses which is so well provided for, but also their routine care. Grosbois has its own blacksmith, kept permanently busy shoeing the 1,300 horses in training every winter. An expert blacksmith is essential to get the best performance from a trotter. The angle of each horse's hoof to the ground is cut to suit his individual action, and great care is taken over the selection of the shoe. This may be made of iron, steel, aluminium, or even rubber or plastic. A heavy shoe encourages the horse to take a longer stride and assists his balance, making a break of stride less likely. But a light shoe allows him to trot slightly faster and tire less quickly. The art is to find the optimum shoe for each horse, and very often these will carry weights at the toe and heel, and will vary for front and back feet. As well as a saddler's workshop, the centre has a highly impressive modern equine hospital, where racetrack injuries are treated by skilled surgeons. Pari-mutuel betting returns in France far exceed those of other European countries, and it's these returns which enable Grosbois to operate on such an impressive scale. Close to Grosbois, but preferring to run his own training operation, is champion trainer-driver Jean-René Goujon.
J'ai fui l'école, je me suis fait porter malade pour quitter l'école et j'ai commencé ce métier à l'âge de 13 ans. J'ai gagné ma première course en 1941. Voilà, ça fait beaucoup d'années. Moi, j'ai pas de secret, beaucoup de travail, beaucoup de chance de rencontrer des grands champions, c'est tout, vous savez, j'ai pas de secret.
Monsieur Goujon has driven 7 or 8 champion horses in his time, but none better than the lazy, bad-tempered Ourasi, who is the current star of the 75 horses in the stables, hailed as a wonder horse throughout Europe.
Ourasi, c'est un très très grand champion, certainement un des meilleurs que j'ai eu la chance de connaître. Mais si vous le voyez comme ça à l'écurie et tout, vous pensez qu'il a mauvais caractère parce qu'il est toujours en train d'essayer de mordre, de jouer et tout. C'est un cheval qui est très feignant à l'entraînement, qui ne se donne jamais, simplement à la compétition. Que ce soit à l'entraînement, que ce soit dans les hits d'échauffement avant la course. C'est un cheval vraiment très très relax, et je crois d'ailleurs c'est ce qui fait sa force. Par contre, dès que nous sommes sous les ordres ou derrière l'autostar, il se tend et là il devient le grand Ourasi que tout le monde connaît. Il se donne à fond. Il a une carrière exceptionnelle puisqu'il a quand même remporté 22 victoires consécutives. Il a gagné 2 fois le prix d'Amérique, 2 fois le critérium de vitesse de la Côte d'Azur, 2 fois le prix d'Europe, toutes les grandes courses qui puissent exister en France. Il a gagné 13 millions à l'heure actuelle, ce qui est déjà beaucoup pour un trotteur.
À 150 mètres de l'arrivée, Ourasi se détache. Ourasi possède plusieurs longueurs d'avance. Si on devrait qu'avec...
The question that springs to mind is, when, if ever, will Ourasi take on Mac Lebel? Although it's not impossible, travelling costs and quarantine laws mean that horses from different continents seldom meet unless they're subsequently to be sold in the new country. But efforts are being made to promote international competition, and Scandinavia is this year's host for the World Championship races, in which 10 top drivers from all over the world qualify for a week of racing in Scandinavia, with the final 2 races here in Sweden. The British driver qualified for this competition by coming second in the European Championships, a great boost for the sport in England and a surprise to everyone.
When we came to Europe, they've never heard of trotting in England. And to see an Englishman, they thought it was quite strange. And to finish second, it was real good.
Racing rules differ slightly from country to country, and the foreign drivers have new problems to face in Scandinavia.
I only drive paces most of the time, you know, and they have hobbles on, and it's a little easier. But with these, you have to keep them balanced all the time.
We're not used to their type of racing either because we race mile races, and these here are 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles or whatever, you know, and it's just a little bit different.
Completely different, our way of racing. This is the first time I've ever been without a fence, a running rail around the track.
In order to overcome the prohibitive costs and quarantine problems of transporting horses, the drivers are all supplied with horses they've never driven before by local trainers like Torbjorn Jansen. But this too creates problems, since the horses are driven much harder than usual, even when they have small chance of winning.
They just can't get the better quality horses. No one wants to have the horse knocked about, I guess.
Whoever got the best horse usually wins.
For all this, the concept of bringing these drivers together is widely supported.
It's nice to get all the countries together and meet everybody, and it's good for the sport.
It's created a lot of interest in Australia, and it's created a lot of interest around the world where the drivers' concern come from.
The clear favourite is the Norwegian Ulf Thoresen, who has a 15-point lead over the Australian Ted Demler.
The winner of the World Championship, I'm quite sure it will be Ulf Thoresen. That's because he is the best driver in the world.
I don't say that. So what the other people say, yeah, I can't stay for that.
He's driving the favourite in the first, and I've drawn bad, so it'll be interesting to see where we finish.
So with horses unknown to them, the drivers move up to the start. And they're racing. But the Canadian's horse is on a break. The Swedish horse moves out, but he's on a break now, That's 2 horses out of the running. And the Danish driver takes the lead. New Zealand and Macau are chasing him, with Ted Demler and Joe Marsh bringing up the rear. Ulf Thuresen is challenging the Dane now, but here comes Ted Demler, making an extraordinary run up the outside. Right into the lead. Ted Demler is still leading into the home stretch and increasing his lead with every stride, as Ulf Thuresen drops way back among the stragglers. And Ted Demler wins the race decisively for Australia.
It was a pleasant surprise, you know. I'm sort of in the hot seat now.
They told me my horse was very strong. I have to push him the whole way, but he was finished after 1 turn, ice cold.
Ted Demler now leads by 2 points, and all is dependent on the final race of the championships. A chaotic start. Neither Ted Demler nor Ulf Thuresen were on the gate. And the Swede breaks early again. Joe Marsh moves up to take the lead, stalked by the New Zealander and the Dane. Then comes Stephen Lees for Britain. As they come up the home stretch, it's the Dane Birger Jorgensen struggling for the lead with the New Zealander Maurice McKendry. But the real fight is between Ted Demler and Ulf Thuresen, who are battling for 3rd place and the World Championship title. And the Dane wins the race from the New Zealander, but no one can see who came in 3rd. And the stewards are left to make the final points calculation as soon as they get the results. And Australia wins the World Championships this year. This may not be the best way of deciding a world champion, but the spirit of competition and cooperation shown throughout this international event counts for more than any medal.